Chapter 1057. Master, Yun Xiaofan, who had been defeated in both matches, went straight to Yun Yang's room on the central peak. Her eyes were red as she pulled at Yun Yang's sleeve. "I've embarrassed you." "I'm sorry." Yun Yang looked at the little girl's two braids that were sticking up because she lowered her head and was amused. "I'm very satisfied that you've come this far. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just do your best. There's no need to force yourself." Yun Yang was already very satisfied that a little girl who was only 12.5 years old could have such an achievement. However, the little girl was obviously very dissatisfied. She went around to Yun Yang's back and said, "Master, I think you must be tired after sitting all day. Will massage your shoulders for you." She began to massage diligently, looking at Yun Yang fawningly as she did so. Her face was full of sneakiness as if she had an ulterior motive. Yun Yang snorted and said, "One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. Just tell me what you want. There's no need to play tricks." Yun Xiaofan was still massaging Yun Yang's shoulders ingratiatingly and said, "Master is indeed wise and perceptive. You can see through my ulterior motives at a glance. He. I feel that I should still have the confidence to rank first in today's match. But when Senior Brother Sun and Senior Brother Bai go back, the two uncle masters will definitely give them special treatment." Yun Yang rolled his eyes and said, What do you mean?" Yun Xiaofan giggled and said, "The next match is the last before the Celestial Luck Banner. It's not a big deal if I lose. My face is not worth much, but, if Master's reputation is tarnished, it will be my sin." Yun Yang snorted and said, "Just say that you want special treatment too." "What a sweet tongue." Yun Xiaofan stuck out her tongue and said fawningly, "I'm just afraid that Master will be too tired and can't bear to." Yun Yang sighed and said, "Why don't you cultivate diligently? At least you'll be able to be frank and upright." Yun Xiaofan felt like crying. "But if I'm beaten down, and I'm a girl? Senior Brother Sun and Senior Brother Bai don't know how to give in to a little girl like me. They are both men, but they're so ungentlemanly." Yun Yang rolled his eyes and said nothing. Yun Xiaofan rolled her eyes as she massaged Yun Yang's shoulders more diligently. "In fact, I don't need much special treatment. But, when I saw Master practicing the sword the last time, I felt that Master's sword technique was truly amazing. If I could learn a move or two, I think I wouldn't be ashamed of Master." Yun Yang rolled his eyes but remained silent. "As the eldest disciple of the main peak, I feel terrible seeing that the position of the chief disciple is always given to people outside the main peak. My junior brothers and sisters all say that I, the eldest senior sister, am useless and incompetent." Boo-hoo-hoo, she actually began to cry. Yun Yang glanced at her from the corner of his eyes and saw tears rolling down her cheeks. This little drama queen. Yun Yang knew that the girl was only faking her tears to arouse his sympathy. But what was rare was that he could actually fake cry until his tears flowed and he was out of breath. It seemed like this was really a skill. Yun Yang mused and said, "Let me think." Seeing that there was a chance, Yun Xiaofan's spirits were lifted and she cried even harder. This disciple just wants to snatch back our rightful position for the main peak." Yun Yang pretended to be moved and said with emotion, "All right, since you're so sincere, I'll teach you 3 sword techniques. These 3 techniques should be enough for you to practice in the next few days." "Wow!" Yun Xiaofan leaped high and beamed with joy. "Master, you're so kind. This disciple loves you so much. Ha ha ha." She planted a kiss on Yun Yang's face and jumped up and down with a strange cry. The hidden bitterness that was on the verge of tears just now was nowhere to be seen. "Cheeky." Yun Yang snorted. "Watch carefully. I'm only going to show it once. How much you can comprehend depends on this moment." Yun Xiaofan went from being extremely excited to extremely quiet at once. She sat down with her eyes wide open and did not move. This girl was really a mischievous one. Yunyang did not know whether to laugh or cry. In reality, it seemed that it was not Yun Xiaoshin's baseless speculation or a little girl's misjudgment. While the little girl was begging Yunyang to teach her some techniques, Shi Wuchen, Kong Luoyue, and the others were really giving their disciples special treatment. Everyone's thoughts were similar, trying their best to improve their disciples' ranking. Shi Wuchen and the others were also filled with bewilderment. Yunyang's personal disciples were treated no differently from their own disciples in the sect. Even if their aptitudes were better, there should not be such an overwhelming gap. The aptitudes of the first-generation disciples of the 9 Peaks were all at the same level. Yunyang's disciples were generally younger, and their starting point was at the bottom of the 9 Peaks. Otherwise, it would not have been impossible for the disciples of the main peak to be ranked among the top 10 disciples after the first competition of the 9 Peaks. They still remembered that the only relatively outstanding disciple of the main peak at that time was the little girl, Yun Xiaoshin. She was only a Jade Mystic, and although she was the top disciple among the Jade Mystic disciples, she was still just a Jade Mystic. Why was it that each and every one of them seemed to have taken some kind of drug now? Be it their cultivation base or combat skills, they were all improving at an appalling speed. Their disciples were clearly working very hard as well, but compared to the others, they paled in comparison, and could not compare. What was going on? Because of this matter, the 8 of them came to the central peak at the same time, intending to watch Yunyang instruct his disciples. They wanted to see if their leader had a knack for disciplining his disciples. Although he looked unfamiliar, he might have a unique mind. But when they arrived, they did not see Yunyang immediately. "Where is your master?" In the main hall, Yun Xiaoshin answered crisply. Ren Qinghuang was stunned. "Doesn't he watch you practice outside and give you some pointers at any time?" "Master never watches us practice from the outside." Everyone was stunned. "If you are so irresponsible, how do your disciples improve? It seems that things are getting more and more unreasonable." Watching Yun Xiaoshin cultivate by herself and guide her junior brothers and sisters at the same time, the 8 people's eyebrows twitched. Whoever was out of shape would be kicked by the little girl. "Are you stupid? Look at the situation now, how can your movements be out of shape?" Whoever was out of focus would be kicked by the little girl. "What are you thinking about? Are you trying to embarrass Master? Are you a spy from the other peaks, trying to dirty the pot of good soup of the main peak with a stinky fish?" Shi Wuchen and the others tried their best to maintain their composure and not fall out with each other on the spot. What kind of mouth did this little girl have? How could she say anything she wanted? She said whatever she wanted, and she said whatever she didn't. Chapter 1058. However, Yun Xiaoshin's little mouth was pouting, and even sharper words came one after another. "Don't think that it's only your own business to be ashamed. You're the disciples of the central peak, and if you're ashamed, you'll be ashamed of the central peak. Whoever is ashamed of the central peak will be ashamed of Master and all of us. Just you wait. Master has never scolded you because he has a good temper and is kind, but we won't spare you. We're all lonely souls without a home. It was Master who gave us a new home. We're a family, and we should work together and move forward bravely for this family. If any of you bring shame to this family, think about it. Think about it. Do you even have the slightest bit of humanity? What's the point of barely living?" After listening to the little girl's words, Shi Wuchen and the others, without exception, broke out in a waterfall of sweat, their backs drenched in sweat. Then, those with sharper minds, such as Ren Qinghuang and Luo Dajiang, frowned slightly as if they were deep in thought. As long as one pondered the little girl's words carefully, it was not difficult to see that the disciples of the central peak had a particularly strong desire for things such as sense of honor, sense of belonging, and sense of belonging. It was a kind of protection that came from the bottom of their hearts and was fully put into action. This belief was not only about becoming stronger, but it was also about protecting the family, protecting the collective, and always protecting the name of the main peak. Everything was for the main peak. In fact, compared to their own strength, these illusory things were even more important to them. Ren Qinghuang and Lan Ruojuan exchanged a glance and nodded at each other, each understanding something in their hearts. S3, those who worked hard to move forward for the sake of becoming stronger would inevitably be weak, which was completely different from the team atmosphere of the Central Peak. This was because the people of the Central Peak were like a person who had a belief. Their subsequent actions were basically all for this belief, and they would fight for it for the rest of their lives. For the sake of personal strength, perhaps one day, when their determination was thwarted and they were at their wits' end, they would inevitably be discouraged and doubt themselves. Perhaps, they would slack off when things were going smoothly, and they would not move forward. However, there would never be an end to fighting for faith and working hard for faith. First place, I have to keep this first place, not for myself, but for the Central Peak. Becoming a venerable is not the end, I have to continue working hard. Becoming a saint is not the end, but in the process, I still have to work hard. I have become famous in the Jianghu, I have shocked the world, I have brought glory to the Central Peak, but it is still just a process, a moment of pride. Because of this glory, I need a lot, the more the better. Even if I become the number one in the world, I'm still a disciple of the residents of 9 Supreme Central Peak. The glory will always belong to the residents of 9 Supremes' main peak, and I will always be a part of it. So this is the motivation of the Central Peak's disciples. This is the truth, Lan Ruojuan muttered to himself. We use ourselves as a mirror. When we guide our disciples, we unknowingly make them pay too much attention to their individual strength, while the disciples of the Central Peak start from the fact that their goal is to defend the glory of TT. These are two completely different paths. The essence is different, and the results are naturally different. Xiaofan, come here. Kong Luoyue beckoned. Greetings, Uncle Master Kong. Yun Xiaofan came over and bowed obediently. Her temperament and even her appearance when she was clamoring just now were completely different. Doesn't your master ever explain the difficulties to you? Kong Luoyue asked. Yes, Yun Xiaofan said, he only explains to us in the hour before breakfast after the morning exercise. Everyone, if there was something they didn't understand, they had to raise it at that time and then answer it. Once it was too late, they wouldn't wait for it. Once you miss that hour, master won't explain anymore, and you can only wait until the next morning. Luo Dejiang clapped his hands and sighed. Wonderful. What's wonderful about it? Shi Wuchen did not understand. Tua, let me tell you, try calling me Tua again. I'm your second brother. Do you know that? Having been scolded, Luo Dejiang turned his head away in a fit of pique and stopped talking. It was Kong Luoyue who explained, when we teach our disciples, we often patiently answer them for a second or even a third time if they don't understand the first time. Of course, this will not cause the disciples to have any more doubts about the current problem, but it imperceptibly makes them dependent on us. On the other hand, on the Central Peak, we only need to answer once, or just once, because the time we have to answer each day is relatively limited. In this limited time, I must prepare the part that I don't understand the most early and ask it in the morning to get the answer. Moreover, I must remember Master's answer firmly. If I neglect it or make a mistake, I'll have to wait at least one more day. In such an atmosphere, I may never catch up with my peers if I wait one more day. In order to find the answer to the current problem, they may have been thinking about how to ask since the night before, remembering it even in their dreams, fearing that they would forget it. When they ask it the next day, Boss Yun will point out the key point with just one sentence, and when they are enlightened, they will naturally remember it more deeply. Then, they will practice accordingly, and there is no need to worry about the best effect. This is the ultimate epiphany under a high-pressure atmosphere. It's not taught at all, but learned by themselves. In such an atmosphere, it's not easy for them to not comprehend it so deeply. Besides, there's also an eldest senior sister like her. Kong Luoyue had been transmitting his voice with a wry smile. Yun Xiaofan, this little girl, has always been in the position of the pressurizer. This one is embarrassing, that one is embarrassing, that one is letting down the central peak, that one is letting down master. With such a supervisor, no one dares to slack off. For a long time, it has even formed the conditionals, in the spiritual sea. This practice has its drawbacks. If it were done to 17 or 18 years old children, they would most likely develop a rebellious mentality. This is a common problem of young people, but this is the best method for these 11 and 12-year-old children. When this ideology takes shape, it will only grow stronger and stronger, and will not weaken. What's more, Yun Xiaofan has already done everything she said in front of everyone. Everyone has tried their best to catch up, but they can't, and can only look up to her in admiration. I believe that the thoughts of the disciples of the Central Peak now are to follow in eldest senior sister's footsteps, and not to be left too far behind by her. If they continue to grow like this, the disciples of the Central Peak will be brainwashed, and the more they grow, the more deeply rooted they will become, unbreakable, and indelible. Thinking deeper, Boss Yun doesn't show up except after dawn. What about those disciples who have new questions and are eager to answer them? They can only ask their senior brothers and sisters, or even junior brothers and sisters, to help each other and themselves, and the relationship between them will deepen day by day. Over time, the whole sect will be like a piece of iron. In fact, it won't even take a long time. Now, it's already a piece of iron. Kong Luoyue sighed. Chapter 1059. In the Central Peak, Master is a superior presence. In the disciples' hearts, he's no different from a god. Below Master, the eldest senior sister is serious and responsible while the brothers are united. Even if there's a conflict, they'll tell each other everything they know when they're cultivating. Even if there's a conflict, they'll be able to resolve it slowly. Kong Luoyue pursed his lips. Look at Hu Xiaofan and Lu Changman. They're acknowledged by the 9 peaks to be irreconcilable enemies. If there's something Lu Changman doesn't understand, Hu Xiaofan will beat him up first and then explain in detail. Do you think this is how enemies interact? Everyone looked over. Hu Xiaofan and Lu Changman were walking together, and Hu Xiaofan didn't hide his disdain at all. While he was talking, he was gesturing with his hands. Lu Changman's bruised and swollen face was full of contemplation, and he seemed to have realized something. All these are things that the other peaks don't have. Among the disciples of the Central Peak, when one person improves, it means that many others advance together. Even if someone falls behind, the others will pull him along to improve. It's in such an atmosphere that everyone helps each other. No matter how stupid one is, he'll be pulled along. Otherwise, he'll be embarrassed if he falls behind. Look over there, on the other side, a little girl about 8 or 9 years old was earnestly listening to the explanations of the little girls beside her with a face full of eagerness. Then, all of them circulated their qi and let her practice at once, without blinking. Then, they began to pick out mistakes and give pointers, again and again. That girl should be the weakest in the Central Peak right now, but since we've arrived until now, she's already familiarized herself with at least 3 of the moves that she's initially unfamiliar with in the past half a quarter of an hour. With the help of such a group, how can she really slow down? Especially when each of the Central Peak's disciples is talented, they're not actually stupid. Ren Qingquang added, I overheard it just now. While the others were guiding others, they were also meditating on their own cultivation. Each of them would talk about their own understanding of the techniques that the person being guided was practicing. It was as if everyone was refining the technique again, and they were even practicing it in a more perfect way. Kong Luoyue sighed. Yun Yang's hands-off approach and letting his disciples develop on their own has resulted in such an effect. It's truly amazing. On the other hand, we are much more diligent than Elder Yun, but the 1G disciples are still surpassed one by one. This person is really incomparable. Shi Wuchen looked as if he had understood something as well. Boss Yun is a god in our disciples' hearts, and we are only masters in our disciples' hearts. This is already a fundamental difference. Actually, it's not just the disciples of the Central Peak. Even our disciples have a look of admiration and reverence when they talk about the sect leader. This is the attitude that this group of people can show, because they are constantly surpassing others. That was enough. It's more than enough. Luo Dujiang had a thoughtful look on his face as he said, "Boss has always told us that we want to build a sect, not a gang, but I've been clueless about it. And now, I seem to understand, I really understand. Looks like we need to change our teachers' attitude and teaching methods. If this goes on, there will be no place for our disciples in the residence of 9 Supremes in the long run." Yun Xiaoshin's reprimand came from the other side. You haven't even entered the top 10 in this competition. Do you think it's only your own business that you're useless, irresponsible, and incompetent? Where do you put your master's face? I'm asking you, where do you put it? We're the Central Peak. We're the sect leader of the Central Peak. You guys were actually beaten up like dogs. It's so embarrassing. Kong Luoyue suddenly wanted to hit someone. Remember? We're the disciples of the Central Peak, the head Supreme's disciples. We should take the top 10 places. Do you understand? The little girl's saliva was flying everywhere. This is the demeanor that the disciples of the Central Peak should have. Xiaofan rolled his eyes, looked at the uncle masters next to him, and said with a smirk, "It's all thanks to eldest senior sister's peerless demeanor that you've trampled all the disciples of the other peaks under your feet. We'll always listen to your orders." Yun Xiaoshin said angrily, "Xiaofan, how dare you talk so much? If you can't defeat Bai Yexing in the next competition, you might as well find a crooked tree and hang yourself." Hearing that, Xiaofan continued to grin and said, "Eldest senior sister, how can you put something that even you can't do on me? But it's not a big deal. I'll definitely defeat Yu Qingheng in the next competition, and if I can't do it, I'll find a crooked tree and hang myself." Yun Xiaoshin was furious. "So what? I know you haven't given up and have been thinking about me. Don't worry, I'll first defeat Bai Yexing in the next competition, and then I'll defeat Sun Mingxiu. If I can't do it, I'll find a crooked tree and hang myself." Xiaofan did not think it was a big deal as he said in a strange voice, "So what if you can reach the top? My goal is not only Yu Qingheng and Bai Yexing, but also you, eldest senior sister. Do you think I can do it?" Shi Wuchen and the others had already lost their minds when they heard the first half of Yun Xiaoshin's words, but when they heard the second half and Xiaofan's announcement, they could not help but feel indignant. It turned out that these two fellows were so ambitious. Kong Luoyue was the first to turn and leave, followed by Ren Qingquang and the others. They could not bear to listen to it anymore. Staying here was simply heart-wrenching. S3, you're too arrogant. Can you be any more arrogant? I'll let my disciples teach you a profound lesson in the last competition. They had come to steal the master's skills, but in the end, they had found out what they wanted to know, but their hearts had been pierced through. The 8 of them left. Yun Yang still looked calm as he quietly appeared in front of the hall's door. Dong Qitian frowned. "Why didn't you say all this in person?" Yun Yang replied faintly, "Elder Dong, you're being unfair. I've said this countless times that day. It's obvious that they're not taking it seriously. They're still training their disciples the way they're training themselves, or perhaps, they're training their disciples the way their masters trained them back then. Facts have proven that, only when the facts are proven can the words be truly understood. Some words can only be understood through someone else's mouth. There are some things that they will only understand after they comprehend it themselves. This is life, this is life. Dong Qitian seemed to have understood something. This is probably like raising a son, Dong Qitian said. Dong Qitian said, there are some things that they won't listen to no matter what their parents tell them. However, at a certain point in time, when they've been triggered and experienced it personally, they'll regard it as a wise saying. Am I right? Yun Yang did not know whether to laugh or cry. He squinted at him and said, Elder Dong, you're exaggerating. They're not my sons. Chapter 1060. Time went by little by little. 1 second to remember. There was no pop-up window for free reading. Every disciple of the 9 Peaks was working hard, fighting for every minute and second, refusing to slack off. Every day when Tai set the mountain, it would cause a sigh of indignation. Day by day. How can time pass so quickly? My mystical chi hasn't made much progress yet. I'll have to put in more effort tonight, for more days, and the fateful moment will be decided. 3 more days. Only 2 more days. The countdown to the last day. On the night before the last match, S3, Yun Yang appeared in the little fellow's room. Now that all the tanks are here, I'll count to 10. Go to sleep. Whoever is not asleep after a quarter of an hour will be expelled from the sect immediately. Yun Xiaofan, who was about to organize her junior brothers and sisters for a final assault, pouted and went to sleep. A quarter of an hour later, Yun Yang stood in the void outside, listening to the even breathing inside with a smile. Early in the morning. The last round of the 9 Peaks competition before the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner had arrived. After this martial arts competition, the final decision on who would be selected for the expedition would be made. The competition began under the attention of everyone in the residence of 9 Supremes. All of them. Including the 10,000 children who had not yet been recruited, they were all sitting quietly in the stands. Although these children had only been cultivating for a short time, the strongest among them had already reached the Earth mystic realm. However, the residents of 9 Supremes had no plans to recruit new disciples now, so no matter how talented they were, they could only live in the mansion for the time being. All he could do was work hard in silence, waiting for the next recruitment of the residents of 9 Supremes. All the children knew that this was the most important competition for their senior brothers and sisters. The winner would represent the sect in the expedition and seize the Celestial Luck Banner, which they had been relying on for the rest of their lives. All the disciples' palms were hot and sweaty, and their eyes were burning with anxiety. I wonder which senior sister and senior brother will win. The Celestial Luck Banner has always been something that only exists in legends. Perhaps it will appear in our sect soon. No matter who wins or who goes to battle, he or she will be the eternal hero of the residents of 9 Supremes. As these words came out, the tens of thousands of people in the venue fell into an unprecedented silence. Yes, no matter who it was, as long as they won, they would be the residents of 9 Supremes' hero. A war drum resounded. The disciples of the 9 Peaks are out. In the sky, 10 rainbows lit up from different directions and flew over. The Demiurge Flawed 10 quietly appeared in front of the spectator stand. There were 5 seats on each side, and the 10 of them sat down according to their order. Greetings, masters. 10,000 disciples knelt down and paid their respects. The disciples of the 9 Peaks filed in through the entrance, and the first to enter were the disciples of the Central Peak. They were all dressed in snow-white robes, and Yun Xiaofan was at the forefront with her hand on the hilt of her sword, her little face cold and solemn. Behind her were Qing Jiajia, Hu Xiaofan, Lu Changman, and the others. Next, Sun Mingxiu came in with his junior brothers and masters. In the end, it was Bai Yexing who came in first. The disciples of the 9 Peaks were arranged according to 9 directions, each occupying a corner. It was as if a layer of pure white snow had suddenly fallen from the lush greenery of the residence of 9 Supremes. Suddenly, a stream of auspicious air appeared in the air and rose toward the residence of 9 Supremes. Yun Yang, dressed in purple as usual, appeared quietly in the air and flew leisurely to the seat in the middle. S3, Sect Leader Master is out. All the disciples present were inexplicably excited when they saw him. Everyone's eyes were glued to the screen, and their eyes were burning with passion. Without their sect leader, there would be no residence of 9 Supremes today. This sentence had long taken root in the hearts of all the disciples and would never be erased. Without the residence of 9 Supremes, they would still be goods, beggars, and no one would look up to them. Only their sect leader master was willing to take them in. All the disciples were accepted regardless of their origins and status. That was why there was such a cozy family that was like a paradise. All the wandering disciples once again had the feeling of home. From nothing to the creation of the residence of 9 Supremes, from being a single entity to the present gathering of tens of thousands of people. From a weak cultivation base to the present, he had worked hard to protect the disciples' peaceful and happy lives. Greetings, Sect Leader Master. Many disciples could not help but burst into tears. When they saw their sect leader, it was as if they had seen their parents, and their hearts were burning with passion. At ease. Yun Yang's voice rang through the sky and shook the great void. Today is the first big day since the establishment of the residence of 9 Supremes, and it is also the first step on the right path of the celestial luck banner. The masters are ready. Now, it's up to you, the younger generation, to see if you can shoulder the burden and amaze us. At the front of the line, Sun Mingxiu, Bai Yexing, Yun Xiaofan, and the others all had their eyes gleaming when they heard that, and they puffed up their chests. No failures or accidents are allowed in this expedition. Yun Yang scanned the crowd and said faintly, among martial artists, the strong reign supreme, the accomplished ones are first. This is an iron law, a basic rule that has existed since time immemorial. In this world, from the past to the present, this is the standard. When they are weak and bullied, most people will only complain about the unfairness, and only a few will choose to make themselves stronger. However, this choice is the starting point of the road to becoming an expert. I hope that each of you can become stronger and keep moving forward on this road of being an expert. Without further ado, the competition officially begins now. All those who are interested in competing for the top 10 disciples, take a step forward. A rumble rang out. Without exception, the 75 first-generation disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes took a step forward in unison. No one was afraid before the fight began. Shi Wuchen burst out laughing. He looked at the youngest disciple of the central peak, Mo Yu, who was only 8 years old. He did not know whether to laugh or cry as he said, Yu, it is indeed very commendable for you to reach the level of immortal Xian at the age of 8. However, you are overestimating yourself if you want to compete for the position of the top 10 disciples with your cultivation base. Step down. Mo Yu puffed up her cheeks and said loudly, Master said that no matter what my cultivation base is, the heart of an expert must always be courageous and unwavering. So what if my cultivation base is shallow and I'm young? I will never back down if I want to fight. The little girl's frail body was like a shy tree in the wind, but she shouted with all her might, and her voice was not weak at all. Shi Wuchen was taken aback and said, all right. Don't cry when you're hurt later. Mo Yu said loudly, Master said that most of the time, we will habitually choose to accept things that have already been agreed upon. For example, the competition of the top 10 disciples, senior brother Sun and senior sister Yun are the top 10 seeded contestants, and so on. But when we choose to accept this recognition, it means that we have already withdrawn from the competition. We have lost the qualification to compete. The road to the strong requires disapproval and never giving up. You are stronger today, stronger than me, and you can defeat me. Of course, I will call you senior brother and respect you. But if I defeat you tomorrow, you must turn around and call me senior sister. The title of senior brother and senior sister is never just a position in the residence of 9 Supremes, but an honor. The little girl's crisp voice echoed in the air above the competition venue. All the children's faces darkened in thought, and many of their eyes lit up. This was not a position, but an honor. Shi Wuchen could not help but shake his head and sigh. Yun Yang's ability as a disciple of T school was truly brilliant. He had really F***ked. Not only Shi Wuchen, but the others, such as Luo Dajiang, had also F***ked in their hearts, even though they did not say it out loud. Even Dong Qitian, who did not show himself but was hiding beside Yun Yang, admired him even more. The top 10 from the previous competition will not be changed for the time being. The remaining 65 disciples will decide on 10 challengers. Yun Yang said faintly. The final competition before the expedition to the Celestial Luck Banner had officially begun. Amp. Chapter 1061. Half an hour later, the 10 challengers that were chosen by the 65 disciples had all appeared. The rest of the eliminated disciples looked lonely, but they were not willing to give up. The level of strength could not be faked. If they were not strong enough, they had to admit defeat. What was the point of blaming others and God? Among the 10 challengers, Lu Chongman was ranked first. Mo Yuyu, who had been defeated early, pouted. Her eyes were red, and she was about to cry. There were also a few other little girls. Tears were rolling down their cheeks and they looked like they were about to cry. But no one comforted them. It was one thing to have confidence and fighting spirit and not give up, but it was another thing to have real strength and the final result. Ambition and persistence could not change the reality that one's strength was inferior to others. The sect leader had strictly ordered that the losers should taste the bitter fruit by themselves, and no one was allowed to comfort them. After an hour of rest, the challenge of the top 10 disciples officially began. The fierce battle on the stage was too much for the audience to take in, and they exclaimed from time to time. One by one, the senior brothers and sisters went on the stage to fight. Then the winners stayed on the stage, and the losers left. Every battle was intense to the extreme, and brilliant to the extreme. The senior brothers and senior sisters were like eagles soaring in the sky, dragons swimming in the sea. Every move they made showed their extraordinary power, dazzling all the little fellows. All of them had the same thought in their minds: I want to do the same in the future. Senior brother Sun was gentle, refined, and had the demeanor of a gentleman. Senior brother Bai was handsome, tall, and full of righteousness. Senior sister Yun was valiant, elegant, and indescribably beautiful. Senior brother Hu was quick-witted, and his strength was unfathomable. Senior sister Lin looked extremely weak, but she was extremely fierce the moment she started fighting. Senior sister Cheng looked gentle and pleasant, and she gave others the feeling that she was their own big sister. I like her so much. All the little guys watching the battle blinked their eyes. At this moment, something called idol was quietly born. As a result, each disciple who went on the stage to fight gained a lot of exclusive fans. Later, there were two groups of people fighting because of this from time to time. What? You said senior brother Bai is better than senior brother Sun? What? You said senior brother Bai is not as good as senior brother Sun? What? You think senior sister Yun is not good looking? Beat him. Of course, this was a story for the future. It was a digression and was of no importance. What was truly important was that every single person on the field was fighting with unprecedented intensity and difficulty. The degree of difficulty of this grand competition far surpassed any of the previous grand competitions. Sun Mingxiu received a total of 8 people's challenges. His usually gentle and elegant face turned blue with anger. Yu Qingheng is my old rival, so it's not a big deal even if he's challenging me. Hu Xiaofan's ranking is just below Yu Qingheng's, so it's reasonable and expected for him to challenge me. After all, his strength is no longer weaker than Yu Qingheng's. But the others? You think I'm easy to bully after seeing that I'm defeated by Bai Yexing and Yun Xiuxin, so you can try to bully me, right? This was going too far. Since you want to bully others so much, then just wait to be bullied. This battle lasted until sunset. Only then would the victor be decided. The last battle was still between Bai Yexing and Yun Xiaofan. The battle between them was so intense that the sky and the earth darkened. All the disciples were divided into two groups and cheered in unison, their voices shaking the heavens. At the critical moment, Yun Xiaofan suddenly floated up and raised the thin sword in her hand. An unprecedented sword light bloomed, illuminating the world. As soon as the sword was thrust out, all the light in the sky converged into a dazzling white beam that fell like a waterfall. As the white beam fell from the sky, there was a buzzing and vibrating sound as it rubbed against the void. This was a variation of Yun Yang's saber truth, destiny. Yun Yang had immersed himself in his saber truth, destiny for a long time, and he had long since entered the state of extreme familiarity. That day, when Yun Xiaofan begged him to teach her, he had taught her the saber truth after some slight changes. Nominally, he had taught her 3 moves, but in fact, there were only 3 styles: the merciless blade, the merciless dao, and the saber linger. Yun Xiaofan's move was the merciless blade. When this move was used with a treasured sword, it lacked its original grandeur, but it was more mysterious and unpredictable. However, the subtlety of this move did not diminish at all. In the face of such a famous move, Bai Yexing was in a sorry state. He barely managed to block it with his sword and retreated quickly, trying his best to avoid the attack first and then plan later. However, Yun Xiaofan did not let her guard down at all after gaining the upper hand. She immediately followed up with another move, the merciless dao. A sharp sword light streaked across Bai Yexing's left shoulder and pierced through his robe. Bai Yexing suddenly stopped moving, paused for a moment, and finally said bitterly, "I've lost." He knew very well that Yun Xiaofan had held back a lot in this move. Otherwise, she could have pierced through his shoulder and seriously injured him on the spot. But she did not do so. Although he could still fight, he did not have the nerve to fight again. He was convinced of his defeat and admitted defeat. In the last round of the competition, the top 10 disciples of Residence of 9 Supremes were announced. The top disciple was Yun Xiaofan, the eldest senior sister, the second disciple was Bai Yexing, the third was Xiaofan, the fourth was Sun Mingxiu, the fifth was Yu Qingheng, the sixth was Cheng Jiejia, the seventh was Lin Xiaoro, the eighth was Meng Qianshan, the ninth was Duanmu Feng, and the 10th was Lu Changman. The top 10 disciples stood side by side on the stage, accepting the congratulations of their junior brothers and sisters. The applause was thunderous. Shi Wuchen and the others looked at each other speechlessly. In the beginning, none of the top 10 disciples of Residence of 9 Supremes were from Yunyang's central peak, and Yun Xiaofan, who had the highest cultivation base, was only a jade mystic. But now, among the top 10 disciples, Yun Yang's disciples occupied 4 places. And 2 of them were in the top 3. Not only was the crown of the first place taken by the central peak, but Xiaofan had also defeated Yu Qingheng and then defeated Sun Mingxiu in a tough battle, making him in the top 3. This rate of improvement was simply too great, too terrifying. At the end of the competition, among the top 10 disciples, Yun Yang's disciples occupied 4 places, Kong Luoyue's disciples occupied 2, Shi Wuchen's first disciple Sun Mingxiu occupied 1, and Luo Dajiang's disciple occupied 1. In addition, Tai Qingcang's disciple, Meng Qianshan, and Ren Qinghuang's disciple, Duanmu Feng, each occupied 1 place. Wu Menghuan, Lan Ruojuan, and Shi Bujia, on the other hand, did not even get a place, which made their faces as dark as the bottom of a pot. The faces of the disciples were filled with shame, so ashamed that they couldn't speak. Yun Xiaofan gave a speech on behalf of the disciples. Residence of 9 Supremes has never been our sect, but also the home where we grew up. This time, we are going out to win the celestial luck banner for our home. Let our home be beautiful and strong for generations to come. If we don't succeed, we won't return. If we don't succeed, we won't return. The top 10 disciples shouted in unison. For our home, we will fight to the end all our lives. This ambition will never change, and we will never regret it. Chapter 1062. On the same night, Yun Yang imparted the offensive method of the 9 Supremes formation, and the group began to learn the offensive method of the formation. Actually, Yun Yang had taught them the basic methods of the 9 Supremes formation a long time ago. It was just that the more advanced formations, especially the lethal techniques, were not taught earlier. Firstly, the 9 Supremes formation had a high requirement on the cultivation base of the person who formed the formation. It was not something that could be done easily. Secondly, the formation's lethality was too great. It was a cycle of life and death at every turn. If the disciples did not have relatively strong mental fortitude, it would be difficult for them to master and control it properly. Whether it was Shi Wuchen and the others or the first-generation disciples, all of them had to learn and master the formation this time. The outcome of the formation might not necessarily appear in any camp. Early the next morning, everyone from the residence of 9 Supremes appeared on both sides of the square. It was a sea of people, and it was a sea of people. Yun Yang's purple robe fluttered in the wind as he walked out first. Behind him, 8 of Shi Wuchen's men filed out, followed by the freshly minted top 10 first-generation disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes. I'll have to trouble Elder Dong and 2 brothers to keep watch at home during this expedition. Yun Yang turned to look at Dong Qitian, Guo Nuanyang, and Ping Xiaoyi. Guo Nuanyang and Ping Xiaoyi nodded solemnly. Don't worry, boss. As long as we're still breathing, the residence of 9 Supremes will be safe. Yun Yang nodded and said, the rules of the tournament have been set. Both of you and Qian Duo will comb through the disciples carefully during this period of time. Pick out those with good talents and teach them. The residence of 9 Supremes competition will continue. The resources will be distributed according to the rankings. Understood. Don't worry, boss. When we return, the residence of 9 Supremes will begin a new round of disciple recruitment. The first-generation disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes will stop at those who are ranked above Earth Mystic. The disciples recruited in the future will be taught by these disciples on behalf of their masters. They'll be considered as second-generation disciples. These 10,000 disciples can all be listed as second-generation disciples and above. Those who are rescued in the future will be below the third generation. About this, think about it yourselves. Come up with a rule. Yes, understood. Qian Duo finally smiled through his tears. After all, these were his forte. Dong Qitian rolled his eyes and was about to speak. Yun Yang had anticipated his opponent's intention and cut him off in advance. This is the third favor I would like to ask of Elder Dong. Dong Qitian's words were stuck in his throat. After a while, he said in a muffled voice, all right. Yun Yang had been hesitant to bring Dong Qitian along for the battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. The benefits of bringing Dong Qitian along were obvious. With this big boss to hold the line, their foundation would increase exponentially, and they would be able to deal with any accidents. However, the drawbacks were also obvious. If Dong Qitian made a move, the residence of 9 Supremes would definitely attract the covetous attention of the high-ranked sects in the Bound of Yellow Continent. It was not necessarily a good thing to be targeted by those high-end forces too early. Furthermore, Yun Yang had not forgotten about Dong Qitian's imprisonment. There had to be a powerful expert behind it. With Dong Qitian's appearance, it was unknown if the other party would take action or how he would do it. However, judging from the way the other party had imprisoned Dong Qitian, the slightest action would be earth-shattering. The residents of 9 Supremes could not withstand it, so it was better for them to slow down and fight steadily. Send off sect leader master, uncle masters, and senior brothers and sisters. We will win this battle. The residents of 9 Supremes will win. Tens of thousands of disciples shouted in unison, their deafening cries almost breaking a hole in the sky. Let's go. Yun Yang waved his hand. 20 people converged into a huge sword light and flew out of the residence of 9 Supremes at top speed, leaving a trail of dust behind them. They had finally set off. Except for Yun Yang, everyone was very excited at the moment, including Shi Wuchen and the other Demiurge Flawed 10. This included Shi Wuchen and the other members of the Demiurge Flawed 10. They were called Whetstones wherever they went. This name had been with them for far too long. Now that they could finally step into the mortal world again, their state of mind was completely different. Let's see who dares to call us Whetstones now. Those sects who used us as Whetstones in the past, we'll crush them back one by one. When the group had gone dozens of miles away, they suddenly heard someone calling from behind, "Wait for me." Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw Jiang Luoluo, dressed in red, running toward them like a bride. Luo Dajiang's face darkened. "We're going to do something serious this time. Why are you following us?" Jiang Luoluo snorted and said, "You said that you would marry me when you got the celestial luck banner. How can I rest assured if I don't follow you to such a big thing? What if you meet a few coquettish bitches this time? I don't care, I have to watch you and follow you." Luo Dajiang was speechless. "You are really my great aunt. What are you talking about? Coquettish bitches? What do you mean you can't rest assured?" Jiang Luoluo, a latecomer who might be considered an uninvited guest, was included in the group of people who were going to the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner this time. "Sister-in-law, I've never heard you mention it before, but your sect is?" Yun Yang asked. Jiang Luoluo beamed with joy. "My sect is the Phoenix Cry sect, which ranks in the top 3 in possession of middle-class celestial luck banners. Well, our sect ranks second in the Sacred Heart Palace in possession of middle-class celestial luck banners." At least in the eyes of the disciples, this master's wife was a strange person. Everyone who called her Lady Jiang or Big Sister Jiang would be surprised. Whenever they addressed her as Mistress Jiang or Mistress Jiang, she would at least turn a deaf ear to it. But if they addressed her as Mistress Jiang or Sister-in-law, she would agree with a smile. The disciples were now used to calling her Mistress, which was probably the title she was most happy to hear. Including Yun Yang, as long as he was not satisfied with the title, it would be a light punishment to be scolded. Who was Yun Yang? Naturally, he accepted the advice and only addressed her as Mistress Jiang. Dajiang. Yun Yang tilted his head to look at Luo Dajiang. "When we come back, I think you should marry Luoluo as soon as possible. I can't stand it if you delay sister-in-law like this. We brothers can also take this opportunity to have some fun." Jiang Luoluo's face lit up when she heard that. She turned to look at Luo Dajiang, obviously wanting to hear a promise from him. Luo Dajiang smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, Luoluo likes me, and this is something that everyone in the residence of 9 Supremes, young and old, knows. But do you know that I like Luoluo no less than she does?" Chapter 1063. Luo Dajiang's face turned gloomy as he said in a muffled voice, "Then, do you know what position Luoluo has in her sect? She is the seed disciple of Phoenix Cry sect, and her real cultivation base is higher than mine. This is secondary, and I'm not a petty man who can't tolerate my woman being stronger than me. But Luoluo's master, the Jade Knife, Gan Tianyan. She is a top expert in Phoenix Cry sect, second only to the sect leader, and she has never been optimistic about me being with Luoluo. He would never allow me to marry Luoluo. If it's just the two of us, we'll get married. So what if we have to roam the world in the future? However, Luoluo and I are not alone now. If we really get married, we will definitely incur the wrath of the Phoenix Cry sect, and the entire residence of 9 Supremes will be implicated." Yun Yang's eyes flickered as he said in surprise, "There's no need to be like this. Both of you are truly in love with each other. If Luoluo's master really wants Luoluo's good, he will naturally consider Luoluo's feelings and respect Luoluo's choice. Besides, the residence of Nine Supremes is not only the home of the disciples, but also the home of all of us. Boss. You've only been in the bound of universe for a short period of time, so you know too little about the sects and forces in the bound of universe. It's hard for a seed disciple of a big sect to decide his own marriage. How can the higher-ups of the sect consider the so-called love between both parties? Losing a seed disciple for no reason because of a marriage is something that a middle-ranked sect can't accept or even challenge their bottom line. There's no room for negotiation. Luo Dujiang smiled bitterly and said, "I'm really not treating you as an outsider. It's just that our residents of Nine Supremes can't bear the anger of a big sect like Phoenix Cry sect now." Jiang Luo also sighed softly. Her expression became very ugly, and she did not say anything to refute. Because Jiang Luo knew that what Luo Dujiang had said was not wrong at all. They were all critical points. In fact, what Luo Dujiang said was what Jiang Luo was most worried about. If the residence of Nine Supremes was destroyed because of their marriage, Jiang Luo knew that she would never be able to forgive herself for the rest of her life, whether there was a future or not. What's more, there was Luo Dujiang, who valued friendship even more. What to do about this matter was really a difficult problem. Yunyang laughed and said as he hurried along, "Don't worry, both of you. Leave this matter to me." As one of the top 3 sects with mid-class celestial luck banners, it was impossible for the Phoenix Cry sect to be absent from the celestial luck banner battle this time. When the time comes, I will look for your master to discuss this matter. I think they might be willing to give me, the new sect leader of a celestial luck banner sect, some face. On the side, Shi Wuchen smiled and said, "What if the Phoenix Cry sect doesn't give you face?" The implication of Shi Wuchen's words was obvious. Not to mention that residents of Nine Supremes had not obtained the celestial luck banner yet. Even if it did, its future would not be very optimistic. After all, residents of Nine Supremes had just been established and had almost no reputation. What right did it have to negotiate with Phoenix Cry sect? Just because Yunyang was good-looking and handsome? Yunyang laughed and said, "If the Phoenix Cry sect is sensible and doesn't make things difficult for you, we, the residents of Nine Supremes, will naturally return the favor and provide the largest amount of betrothal gifts. In the future, they will know that becoming in-laws with the residents of Nine Supremes is the Phoenix Cry sect. But then again, if they really don't give us face and would rather waste their disciples' lifelong happiness, then we can't talk about it. We'll have to work hard on this matter." Ren Qingquang laughed sinisterly when he heard this. "It's best if they don't give us face. Back then, the Phoenix Cry sect was one of those who humiliated us as whetstones. They have agreed to the marriage, and we are too embarrassed to bring up the past again. No matter how unwilling we are, we have to give Dujiang and our sister-in-law face. But if they really don't know what's good for them, we might have to carefully settle the old scores over the years." Jiang Luo frowned and said, "You don't have to be so hostile. Master loves me the most. I will go and beg her, and she will definitely agree." Yunyang closed his eyes and said with a sigh, "I hope so." Unlike the seniors of the residents of Nine Supremes, it was the first time for the top 10 disciples to follow their masters out. At the same time, they were shouldering such a heavy task. Each of them had a strong sense of mission, responsibility, honor, and worry about personal gains and losses. Of course, the excitement in everyone's heart was also unusual. Among the 10 disciples, Sun Mingxiu, Yu Chengheng, Bai Yexing, Duan Mufeng, and Meng Qianshan were slightly older and more mature, and they also had some experience in the martial world. The others, such as Yun Xiaoxin, Cheng Jiejia, Lin Xiaoro, and Lu Changman, were complete rookies. In terms of martial world experience, although Hu Xiaofan was also young, he had seen the ugly side of the world more than once, so he was the most experienced among the disciples. It was also because of his childhood experience that his state of mind was far superior to others, but it also made him more sensitive. Except for his masters and uncle masters in the residence of 9 Supremes, as well as his senior and junior brothers and sisters in the same sect, Hu Xiaofan did not trust the others, even Sun Mingxiu and the others who belonged to the same sect. Of course, although he had seen many people's hearts, his knowledge of the magnificent scenery of mountains and rivers was no better than that of other disciples. Therefore, in this respect, he was no different from the other disciples. Yun Xiaoxin walked in the front with a tense face. Eldest senior sister, the mountain in front of us looks deep and steep. If it's not occupied by strong people, there must be mystical beasts or demonic beasts. We're following Master and Uncle Masters out this time, so we don't have to worry about it. But next time when we come out to train ourselves, we'd better take a detour when we encounter such a place. We can avoid unnecessary trouble. Sun Mingxiu said softly. This eldest senior sister knows about this. Yun Xiaoxin raised her chin and tried hard to suppress the proud smile that was about to appear when she heard the title eldest senior sister. Well, when traveling in the martial world, it's important to be observant and alert. For example, there are high-level mystical beasts lying in ambush in the dense forests on both sides of us, but they don't show up because they're afraid of our strength. Along the way, I can sense at least a dozen of them on the roadside. It's better to be careful. Sun Mingxiu reminded her. Where? Yun Xiaoxin turned her head hurriedly, but then she came to her senses and said with a straight face, I know. How can I not know what you know? Chapter 1064. Although Yun Xiaoxin came out on top in the competition, Sun Mingxiu was still the strongest among the first-generation disciples of residents of 9 Supremes in terms of mystical qi cultivation base. Yun Xiaoxin might not be able to find out all the information that Sun Mingxiu could. Eldest senior sister, there's gunk at the corner of your eyes, Hu Xiaofan said with a smirk. I know, and I don't need you to remind me. Don't make a fuss about it. Yun Xiaoxin had formed a habit of receiving hints, so she still answered subconsciously. But when she realized what she had done, she did not reprimand Hu Xiaofan. Instead, she hurriedly wiped her eyes with her hand. Although she was running at a high speed, she still took out a small mirror and looked at herself carefully. Only then did she fly into a rage. Hu Xiaofan. Are you itching for a spanking again, you lazy bum? Hu Xiaofan said innocently, it was real just now, but you took it away. You can ask Lu Chongman if you don't believe me. Before he could finish his sentence, a fierce and warning gaze landed on Lu Chongman. As if he did not see it, Lu Chongman answered honestly, no, Hu Xiaofan lied to you. How dare you betray me? Are you itching for a beating? Hu Xiaofan roared. Hu Xiaofan, how dare you lie to me? You are the one who is itching for a beating. Yun Xiaoxin roared. Next to her, Sun Mingxiu frowned with a twisted face. He wanted to explain the basic knowledge of the martial world to his fellow disciples, but these guys were obviously too nervous and excited to listen to him. Bai Yexing smiled and said, Junior brother Sun, these situations. I've only heard about them, and I only know a general idea at most. I haven't experienced it myself, so it's hard to understand. We'll just take care of them when the time comes. There's no need to rush things. You know, more haste, less speed. Sun Mingxiu sweated. That's right, that makes sense. Lin Xiaoro followed closely beside Bai Yexing, her little face full of happiness and reverence. Senior brother Bai, are we considered to be traveling in the martial world now? Yes. But not entirely. When we don't follow Master and Uncle Masters and go out on our own to do tasks or travel, we will be considered to be truly traveling in the martial world, Bai Yeshing explained seriously. Bai Yeshing explained seriously, now, we should be out to broaden our horizons. Lin Xiaoro nodded repeatedly, Senior Martial Brother Bai, when the time comes to roam the martial world, I will still follow behind you, okay? Bai Yeshing said dotingly, that's a deal. A smile bloomed on Lin Xiaoro's face. Laugh. Yun Xiaofan twitched her mouth and muttered, humph, he's only thinking about romance at such a young age, and he's spoiling the reputation of the sect. I can't stand it. Hu Xiaofan, go beat Bai Yeshing up. What? Hu Xiaofan's face instantly turned bitter. I'm not his match, okay? You can just do it yourself. Cheng Jiajia curled her lips and whispered, what's so good about Bai Yeshing? He's far worse than Master. Yun Xiaofan's eyes turned dangerous as she bared her little canine teeth. Jiajia, your thoughts are very dangerous. Cheng Jiajia blushed. What are you thinking about? Master is handsome, elegant, and steady. Every glance and smile of his is otherworldly, like a god in the clouds. Don't you think that kind of aura is not good? Yun Xiaofan snorted and said, yes, of course it's good. When did I say that Master is not good? She rolled her eyes and suddenly felt that it was wrong of her to protect Cheng Jiajia in the past. How could she have such a rebellious thought? This is... Humph. Of course, Master is very handsome, suave, elegant, but this kind of words, is it something you should say? Yun Yang and the others walked in the front, but their pace was not very fast. After all, Yun Yang had just arrived in the bound of universe not long ago, and his knowledge of the local customs was not much better than that of Sun Mingxiu and the others. So, Shi Wuchen and the others naturally took this opportunity to introduce the scenery and terrain along the way to Yun Yang. Whenever Yun Yang passed by a place that he felt was of some value, he would carve the landform in his mind. If he walked past it again, he would be able to remember it clearly. This was a habit that he had formed for a long time. Therefore, although they had experienced many landforms along the way, they were all remembered by him without exception. Right now, we've already traveled over 4,000 kilometers. Based on our current speed, we can reach our destination in 3 days at most. In the evening, Shi Wuchen looked at the map, calculated the distance, and gave an answer with certainty. The illusory sword sect is in front of us. It ranks 7th among the top 10 sects with lower-class celestial luck banners, so its strength is not ordinary. Luo Dujiang chuckled, but there was no smile in his eyes. Ren Qingquang and Lan Ruojuan also had cold eyes. We have suffered a lot from the illusory sword sect in the past. They are just a bunch of clowns. There's no need to pay attention to them now. Yun Yang chuckled. When we defeat them in the battle of the Celestial Luck Banner or defeat their opponents who have defeated them, that will be the greatest punishment for them. Look at their expressions at that time. It will be very interesting. There's no need to be in a hurry. Things in the world often did not go as one wished. Residents of 9 Supremes did not want to cause trouble for the illusory sword sect, but the people of the sect refused to let them go. The next morning, Yun Yang and the others had only walked a few dozen miles when a sword suddenly appeared in front of them and flew into the sky, emitting thousands of rays of light. It was a spectacular sight. Just then, a voice rang out, "Are you friends from residents of 9 Supremes? So what if I am and so what if I'm not?" Shi Wuchen said loudly. "I'm from the illusory sword sect. Sect leader Uncle Master has gone to the 5th heaven and is not here, but I still dare not break the rules. Residents of 9 Supremes has not appeared, so I thought you had taken a detour." The voice said coldly. He smiled coldly and said, "Little did you know that it's really not over yet. You're really calm. Perhaps, you're planning to take advantage of the gap between the sect's elite combat forces on the way to the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner and arrive before the deadline. Now that your wishful thinking has been broken, there's no need to say anything else. Since you want to go here, you must know the rules and pay the toll. He sneered, don't think that I'm bullying you. Residents of 9 Supremes is not qualified to do that. Sure, Wuxian sneered, since when did the illusory sword sect become a robber? Money for the road? Why haven't I heard of it before? Haven't you heard of it now? The man said coldly. He whistled and shouted, brothers, come out and meet the big shots who can go to the 5th heaven to seize the celestial luck banners. Let's see if our cultivation base is worthy of stopping the big shots who are going to the 5th heaven. Before his voice died away, the sound of footsteps could be heard. One by one, the men in cyan came out of the jungle with cold faces. One of the young men crossed his arms and sneered. I've long heard of a new sect called Residents of 9 Supremes or something. It's a cool name. I thought it would be an eye-catching combination, but now I know that it's just a group of whetstones who have gathered together to blow their own trumpet. Residents of 9 Supremes? I think it's more worthy to change the name to Worthless Hall. Ridiculous, ridiculous. Another man also shouted sarcastically. Chapter 1065. There's no need to ridicule the Demiurge Flawed 10. I think the reason why the Residents of 9 Supremes set up by the Demiurge Flawed 10 is probably because there's another person who knows his place and doesn't dare to call himself supremacy. It can be seen that there are still smart people among the Demiurge Flawed 10. They know how to judge the situation and what they're capable of. The other people's foolish actions really shouldn't be criticized. However, the 9 people in front of us are the group of fools who don't know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. A middle-aged man in green walked out slowly, his voice full of contempt. Sect leader Master said that our cultivation base is not enough and we're not qualified to go to the 5th heaven, but in my opinion, even the Demiurge Flawed 10 can go. How can we be worse than them? Master and the others are making a fuss over a minor issue. Another man said sarcastically. Nonsense, Master is weighing the general situation and knows the level of the combat power in the battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. We are stronger than those good-for-nothings, but we're really not qualified to participate in the battle. Otherwise, won't we be on the same level as those who overestimate themselves? Another person said in a mocking tone. How could Yun Yang not understand what was going on? Everything in front of him was just a group of people who had been eliminated by their own sect after all the elites of Illusory Sword sect had gone to participate in the battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. They were unwilling to accept it and were waiting here for the ordinary sects that had not gone there yet. The intention of this group of people was obvious. The so-called money for the passage was just an excuse. Their real purpose was nothing more than to prove themselves by intercepting the relatively weak participating sections. If they could succeed, they could also reduce an opponent for their own sects that were going to participate in the battle. Yun Yang had to admit that it was a good plan. Yun Yang said faintly, they dared to jump out and even mentioned your master's name. Who in our sect is going to pay the toll? Before Sun Mingxiu and others could speak, Xiaofan had already jumped out and said, Master, Master, let this disciple pay for the passage. Before Yun Yang could reply, Xiaofan had already jumped out as if he was afraid that someone else would rob him. At the side, Lin Xiaoro clutched her pocket tightly, her face full of reluctance as she said, I really have to pay for the road. Can't I pay less? I only have 2 pieces of high-grade spiritual jade in my pocket, and they were saved up with great difficulty. Bai Yexing did not know whether to laugh or cry. You don't really think Master is going to pay, do you? Just as he was speaking, he heard Xiaofan's arrogant voice, toll money? That's not a problem. I don't dare to say anything else, but I have plenty of money here. Tens of thousands of top-grade and top-grade spirit jades are in my bag. As long as any of you little thieves can defeat me, I will guarantee that all of you will not have to worry about food or clothing for the rest of your lives, all the way to the Saint Monarch level. Hurry up and come out and spar with this young master. What's the use of that mouth of yours?" When the people on the other side heard this, they all flew into a rage. One of them angrily rebuked, "You're just a kid who's still wet behind the ears, yet you dare to challenge me?" Xiaofan interrupted and said, "Don't. You don't have to waste time telling me your name. I already know your name, as well as everyone else's." "What?" the man asked in confusion. Xiaofan burst out laughing with his hands on his hips. "Corpses." He threw his head back and laughed. "Those who insult my master and the residents of 9 Supremes are sentenced to death." The man was stunned for a moment before he reacted and roared, "Little thief, you're courting death." Before his voice could fade away, he had drawn his weapon and charged forward with a murderous aura. It was a pity that Xiaofan was faster. As soon as the man finished speaking, he had already drawn his sword and charged at the enemy head-on. As soon as Xiaofan drew his sword, there seemed to be a sudden rumble of wind and thunder in the air, and the whole space was plunged into a brief moment of darkness. The leader of the group on the other side cried out in alarm when he saw this and warned, "Retreat." It was a pity that his warning was too late. When Xiaofan struck with his sword, the person on the opposite side only had time to see the dazzling brilliance for a moment. His eyes seemed to have been illuminated by the strong light, falling into an atmosphere of temporary blindness. His mind also became chaotic and hazy because of this. He could not even think of what kind of move he wanted to use to deal with it. His whole person was panicking and confused. He actually became timid before the battle, and was in a mess. Fortunately, he only maintained this state for a moment, for he felt a chill on his neck and all the negative senses disappeared. He had lost all his senses. He had completely lost his consciousness, so of course, he could not feel anything anymore. Puff! Blood splattered. There was a faint smile on Yun Yang's face. Xiaofan's battle this time was commendable, but the cleanliness was more than enough. Xiaofan reached out and caught the head that had flown away accurately in his hand. He asked nonchalantly, "Is this enough to pay for the road?" The leader turned pale and asked in a trembling voice, Who are you?" Xiaofan looked up and said, "I'm Xiaofan, the second disciple of the residents of 9 Supreme Central Peak. Who else wants to pay for the road?" "Are you a seed disciple who is going to participate in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner?" the man asked. Suddenly, there was a wave of fear and absurdity in his heart. Is this the disciple of the Demiurge Flawed 10? Why is this so dreamy? Xiaofan sneered. Nonsense. Are you the next one who wants to collect the road? The man on the other side shuddered more and more, cold sweat dripping down his back. His voice was unprecedentedly weak. This is a misunderstanding. Xiaofan burst out laughing. Misunderstanding? Only the strong are respected in the martial world. How can there be any misunderstanding? I'm just asking you, do you still want the road money? The man immediately said, No. We dare not. It's a misunderstanding. Xiaofan's eyes widened. Misunderstanding? I just said it's not a misunderstanding. Do you think I'm talking nonsense? Now, pay me the road money. Are you going to pay or not? Behind him, Cheng Jiajia's eyes were filled with confusion. What is Xiaofan talking about? Why does he want to collect the road money? Sun Mingxiu smiled and said, Previously, when they asked us for the road money, they were referring to this mountain road. But now, when Xiaofan asks them for the road money, he is asking them for the way to live. Both are the road money, but the meaning is different. But in the end, the strong are respected, and the strength speaks. Yun Xiaoxin's eyes flashed with understanding. Yes, the strong are respected, and the strength speaks. In the field, Xiaofan roared, "If you don't want to pay, I don't want it either. Then, give me your life." Chapter 1066. The residence of 9 Supremes was in a good state, but the other side was caught in an unprecedented dilemma. As the elite disciples of Illusory Sword sect, they had accumulated a lot of depression in their hearts after being eliminated in the qualification battle for the Celestial Luck Banner. That was why they had set up checkpoints here to stop the residents of 9 Supremes and all the small forces who were passing by to participate in the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner. Their real intention was nothing more than to prove their value. You don't let us participate in the battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, but we can prove with facts that we are no worse than those so-called seed disciples and that we can defeat more enemies. In fact, it was a little bit of a fit of pique. Their plan was good, but while their imagination was beautiful, the reality was cruel. Who would have thought that a random disciple from this little-known residence of 9 Supremes, who had just been established, could actually display a formidable ability that could scare all of them out of their wits? He is really strong. His sharp sword moves and strong mystical chi are not something they can compare with in any aspect. Are all the disciples who can participate in the battle of the Celestial Luck Banner so ferocious? When the disciples of the Illusory Sword sect remembered the money that Xiaofan had asked for, before they could reply, Xiaofan had already rushed over fiercely without giving them any chance to explain. As the sword light flashed, he had already rushed into the crowd. As the sword light flashed, the crowd suddenly dispersed. However, among the scattered crowd, several people had already spouted blood from their necks and fell to the ground. One of them cried out, "Wait! Wait! We'll let you go." Xiaofan grinned hideously and said, "But I'm not going to let go of you trash who don't pay the fee." Xiaofan did not say anything. He continued to wave his blood-stained sword again and again, like a poisonous snake spitting its tongue and a flood dragon devouring lives. In just a moment, more than 20 disciples of Illusory Sword sect fell to the ground, howling. However, his attention was not on Xiaofan at all, because Xiaofan's current cultivation, strength, and state of mind were far superior to that of the Illusory Sword sect disciple in front of him. There was no need for him to pay attention to this battle at all. Instead, his eyes fell on the disciples on his side who did not participate in the battle. He saw that among the remaining 9 disciples, several of them had a look of pity on their faces. Sun Mingxiu, Bai Yexing, Xiaofan, Lu Changman, and the others looked as calm as usual, as if they did not see the blood flowing all over the ground in front of them. Standing beside Xiaofan, Sun Mingxiu said, "Eldest senior sister, do you think these people should be killed?" Xiaofan hesitated for a moment and said, "He can be killed." Sun Mingxiu smiled and said, "Can be killed? Why was it that he could only be killed? No, he shouldn't be able to be killed, he should be killed, and he must be killed. Because, if we were in their shoes, if we were slightly weaker, we would be the ones to fall here. Eldest senior sister, do you really think that as long as we pay the so-called toll, the other party will let us go? No, they won't let any of us go. Because they need our heads to prove that they are not weaker than the disciples who have gone to the battlefield." Xiaofan's eyes grew cold and sharp as she said, "Yes, I was thinking too much. So, when we see the weak being slaughtered, we will feel sorry for them. This is human nature, and it is also the normal reaction of a normal person. But at the same time, we must also consider how cruel it will be if these weak people become strong and face those who are weaker than them." Sun Mingxiu's voice was very gentle, but his tone was unusually firm. Xiaofan nodded slowly and said, "Yes, thank you for your advice." Seeing that Xiaofan had gained something from this battle and her state of mind had become more perfect, Yang nodded slightly. Then, he took a moment to sense it and found that although the karma energy that Xiaofan had absorbed after killing these disciples of Illusory Sword sect was not much, it was still in vain. A faint smile appeared on his face as he beckoned to Sun Mingxiu and said, "Mingxiu, come here." Sun Mingxiu came over and said respectfully, "Sect leader." Yunyang nodded and said, "I've seen you following Yun Xiaofan all the time along the way," explaining the martial world to her. "Why are you doing this?" Sun Mingxiu froze for a moment and did not answer for a long time. Yunyang smiled faintly and said, "You're a considerate person with a righteous personality. What you say will always hit the nail on the head. You must have your reasons for doing this. I want you to speak your mind boldly and express your thoughts." Sun Mingxiu took a breath and said in a low voice, "I have my own ideas. Tell me about it." Yunyang's eyes were full of encouragement. With a wave of his hand, Wuxia set up a mystical qi barrier to isolate the outside world from hearing. "During this period of time, I have done my best to cultivate and never dared to slack off. I thought I could be an example to my junior brothers and sisters. But it turns out that my ability is far from enough. At least, I'm not at the level that the chief disciple of Residents of Nine Supremes should have." There was a hint of bitterness on Sun Mingxiu's face, but he said frankly, "The disciples of Residents of Nine Supremes need a leader. Now, Xiaofan has reached this height. With her temperament, aptitude, and personal achievements, it is hard for the first-generation disciples of Residents of Nine Supremes, whether it is me, Bai Yexing, or anyone else, to surpass her in this lifetime. Or I should put it this way, the moment Xiaofan became the top 10 disciples, she has permanently secured her position as the chief disciple of the sect, and she has become the new leader that is undoubtedly more difficult to replace than the other disciples. However, a qualified leader is not only strong and unparalleled. In terms of Xiaofan, her current shortcoming is the lack of temperament and experience in the martial world. But the chief disciple must know these, so that his junior brothers and sisters can take fewer detours and reduce losses. Based on this starting point, I want to teach you all my relevant experience, so that junior sister Xiaofan can understand it earlier, or rather, more deeply. This is also my responsibility." Sun Mingxiu smiled frankly. "That's why I talked a little too much along the way. I didn't mean anything else, and Xiaofan didn't mind my nagging, so she accepted my advice." Beside him, Wuxia looked gratified. Apart from gratification, he also looked a little proud. Yunyang thought for a moment and said, "Mingxiu, according to your plan, what role should you play in the Residents of Nine Supremes in the future?" Sun Mingxiu was stunned when he heard this, and then he fell into deep thought again. He was speechless for a long time. After a long time, he said, I haven't really thought about my future position. I just want to cooperate with the masters, with my senior sisters and brothers, and do my best to make Residents of Nine Supremes flourish and protect all the junior brothers and sisters of the sect. Then, I will feel that my life is complete." "Why do you have such an idea?" Yunyang asked. "A sect must have geniuses, as well as pillars of support. Geniuses are famous all over the world, and pillars are unshakable. As for Sun Mingxiu, do you think he is suitable?" Chapter 1067. Sun Mingxiu smiled sadly and said, "Although I was not born in a famous sect and had a small foundation in the past, my family was attacked by the enemy. My whole family was killed by the enemy overnight. This is the past, and it's useless to talk about it. However, what impressed me most about that battle was that my father was besieged by the enemy and was in danger. I knew that with his cultivation base, he still had the ability to break out of the siege and escape, but he never did. He fought with all his might until the end, and before he died, he roared, 'If a man can't protect his family in this life, what's the point of living?' Over the years, my father's words have often echoed in my ears. Knowing that I can protect everything I have is my obsession in this life. The Residents of Nine Supremes is my home, and my senior brothers and sisters are my brothers and sisters. My great wish in this life is to be together forever, safe and happy. If anyone wants to destroy all this, I will fight to the death to protect them. I will die without regrets. A smile appeared on his face. That's roughly what I think. I really didn't think further. Yunyang smiled warmly and said softly, Mingxiu, you are not bad. Very good. He gave Sun Mingxiu a deep look. This disciple's aptitude might not be as good as by Yexing and Yunxiuxin, but his temperament was very good. Ending his conversation with Sun Mingxiu, Hu Xiaofan had ended the battle as well. He had even collected all the spoils of war and handed them over to Yunyang with a chuckle. Master, I'm lucky that I didn't disappoint you. The loot is rather bountiful. Yunyang's face darkened. What are you laughing at? Hu Xiaofan's face turned pale and he stood straight. I dare not. Give all the trophies to your uncle Master Shi. Yunyang glared at him. Your timing is not bad, but what's with the sword style you're using? It's all messy and disorderly. If it weren't for your cultivation base far surpassing your opponents, the one who would have been killed by my sword would have been you, child. How dare you be so smug now? What are you laughing at? What's so beautiful about it? Could it be that you're coveting the spoils of war and want a share of the profits? Hu Xiaofan was sweating. I dare not. I have no such intention. Yunyang snorted heavily. Hu Xiaofan obediently put his hands down, not daring to make a sound. Yunyang snorted and said nothing more. Yunyang had high hopes for his disciple, Hu Xiaofan. Not only was this child not bad in nature, he could even be said to be very kind. However, his life experience was very different from other disciples. Before he entered the residence of 9 Supremes, he had forged a path of survival by enduring bloodshed. It was because of this that the murderous side of his personality could be said to be the best among all the disciples. Even adults who had been around for a long time could hardly compare to him. If it were not for the residence of 9 Supremes' fortuitous encounter and if he had chosen another path to enter the Tao, even if he was not a bloodthirsty fiend, he would inevitably become an extreme person who was neither good nor evil and only acted according to his own preferences. It was because Yunyang was aware of this that he had been harsh with his words, purposely sharpening them. However, this child's temperament was truly extraordinary. Just as he returned to the group of disciples, he immediately became high-spirited among his senior and junior brothers. Yunyang could not help but be at a loss whether to laugh or cry at this. His temperament was really extraordinary, but his master had just reprimanded him. Couldn't he at least pretend for a while? Move on. Hu Xiaofan killed all the disciples of the illusory sword sect, but he didn't get much. The only valuable thing was a spatial ring, and the rest was mediocre, which was not enough to enter the eyes of a super-rich person like Hu Xiaofan. Yunyang basically glanced at them and asked Shi Wuchen to put them all away, but he did not forget to say, when we return to the sect, give 10% of what we seized this time to Hu Xiaofan as a reward. Hu Xiaofan let out a strange cry and did a somersault. The other disciples were also full of envy and jealousy. Although the harvest was not in the eyes of a rich person like Yunyang, it was still a considerable amount for the disciples of residents of 9 Supremes. Even if it was only 10%, it was already a lot. Everyone began to envy Hu Xiaofan for being rich. At the same time, they blamed themselves, why didn't I rush up just now? The road ahead was clear again, and Yunyang and the others hurried on their way again. Along the way, they had passed through the territory of 4 sections. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or perhaps everyone had the same thought, but 2 more sects actually came to look for trouble. However, the process was even easier than the previous time. All the disciples fought bravely. First, Sun Mingxiu took care of one group of bandits, and then Bai Yexing took care of the other group. All of them were clean and neat, and the battles were finished in minutes. As the eldest senior sister, Yunxiuxin had asked for a fight several times, but she did not get the chance to fight. She could not help but feel unhappy until a group of blind bandits rushed out and accidentally attacked. Without waiting for an explanation, the eldest senior sister rushed forward and killed them with a whirlwind. Finally, she got the chance to fight. After that, there was no more killing for a long time. It was not until somewhere not far from the destination of the Celestial Luck Banner contest that a group of 200 strong men attacked, arrogantly clamoring to abduct female disciples in the sect. With a wave of Yun Yang's hand, the top 10 disciples fought together and killed the group of 200 strong men, leaving not a single one alive. Shi Wuchen had a lot of emotions along the way. I've never had such a good time when I traveled the martial world in the past. When Shi Wuchen said this, everyone smiled. Shi Wuchen said this helplessly, but it was also the truth. When they traveled the martial world before, no matter where they went, as long as the local disciples believed them, they would come up to fight them, in the name of learning from each other. The other side had the elders of the sect to hold the line, so the fight was naturally more daunting than dangerous, and they could fight to their heart's content. But they could not do the same. On the one hand, they could not be killed, and they had to try their best to deal with the enemy. On the other hand, they had to hold back all the time while doing their best, and they did not dare to kill the enemy. Once they killed the enemy by mistake, not to mention the fact that the elders of the sect who were watching from the side would not let it go, even if they managed to escape unscathed for a while, they would still be hunted down by the sect. In the end, they might not die, but their families and friends would inevitably suffer with them. If this situation continued for a long time, the situation would not only be tragic, but also unbearable to look back at. Now, those disciples of the sect, who used to be high and mighty and had no respect for anyone else, died tragically in the hands of their own disciples, their flesh and blood flying everywhere. Even though Shi Wuchen and the others did not fight personally, they could only feel a higher pleasure. To think that this day would come for all of you. After fighting along the way, Ren Qingquang smiled faintly and said, "When we go back, I'm afraid those slaughtered sects will come looking for trouble with us." Looking for trouble? As long as they have the guts to come looking for trouble with us, we'll take them all on. Previously, I was too preoccupied with the demeanor of a teacher to fight with the disciples, but now my hands are itching. Luo Dujiang smiled faintly, full of conceit and elegance. Jiang Luoluo could not help but stare at him, and said, "Dujiang, when you smile, you really have the manliness of a man who can look down on the world." Everyone laughed, their eyes full of ambiguity as they looked at him. Chapter 1068. Everyone's expression froze when they heard that. They had finally arrived. The place that would decide the outcome of the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner. Looking ahead, Yun Yang saw a vast expanse of white mist hundreds of miles ahead of him. When he looked as far as he could, there was only a sea of clouds, and nothing else could be seen clearly. He could not even see the five-tiered peak that Luo Dujiang had mentioned. That's the Celestial Luck Mist. It has already enveloped the entire five-fold peak. It's amazing, amazing. Luo Dujiang took a deep breath, his expression turning solemn as he said in a deep voice, "Five-fold peak is also called the five-fold heaven by the warriors under the jurisdiction of the Sacred Heart Palace. As the name suggests, every additional peak above this five-fold peak is equivalent to ascending one more heaven. Being on top of a mountain and a heaven, the scenery is naturally different from being at the foot of the mountain. That makes sense. The lowest level of five-fold peak is the qualification battle, which is also the starting point of the elimination battle. The second level is the battle for lower-class celestial luck banners, and only a few of us can cross this mountain. The battle for the middle-class celestial luck banner on the third level is even grander, but there are very few participants. As for the battle for the upper-class celestial luck banner on the fourth level, it's far beyond our level, so it's useless to talk about it. As for the fifth level, it's the place supervised by the higher-ups of the Sacred Heart Palace. Yunyang had already learned about five-fold peak from Qian Duo Duo, Shi Wuchen, and Dong Qitian, but when he heard Luo Dajiang's words, he felt refreshed and asked, "Is there any story about this mountain? Is there a saying that the higher the mountain, the higher the sky?" Not really. It said that this mountain was just a very ordinary mountain before, but since it was chosen as the place for the battle for the celestial luck banner, it has been eternally blessed by the thick holy power, protected by the celestial luck, and nourished over time. It has really become a sacred and extraordinary place. Yunyang's interest was piqued when he heard that. Oh, the so-called sacred place and extraordinary place must have something else to it, right? How should I put this? I've only heard about it from the grapevine. I've never seen it for myself. I've only heard that there are countless mysterious signs hidden in the five-fold mountain. The most mysterious of them all is that in the battle for the heavenly kismet, the dead can come back to life on the spot after the victor is decided. In other words, in this battle, there is only victory and defeat, no life and death. Yunyang nodded and said, "Is there no limit to this mystical thing? Can they be resurrected during the Celestial Luck Banner qualification challenge?" Luo Dajiang smiled bitterly and said, "It's not that exaggerated. It can only be resurrected in the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner, and there are many participants in the qualification battle. If all of them can enjoy this mystique, then it will be worthless. It's just a qualifying battle, how can you be qualified to enjoy the opportunity of Tian Qi's resurrection?" Then, he added, "I have never truly participated in the battle of the heavenly fate, so I have to look at the specific circumstances. Everything can only be determined after the battle. What I have said is hard to come by." Looking at the thick fog in the distance, Yunyang said faintly, "Of course I know that. This place is about 4 days away from the battle of the heavenly kismet. We still have some spare time, so we might as well settle down here and rest for a night to conserve our energy. Tomorrow morning, we will go to the five-fold mountain in our best state. All disciples, tidy yourselves up and make sure you're in your best condition. Do you understand?" It was a quiet night. It was the first time Yunyang had participated in such a major event. Although he did not care much about it, he could not be too superficial about it. After all, this was a sacred matter to the entire residence of 9 Supremes, and it needed to be taken seriously. Especially in the hearts of the disciples, their hearts were even more solemn at the moment, as they regarded this as the goal they would strive for in their entire lives. Early the next morning, Yunyang was still dressed in purple as he walked out. The top 10 disciples were all dressed in white, untainted by even a speck of dust, proud and unyielding. Shi Wuchen and the others, on the other hand, were all dressed in green, all clean and tidy. When Yunyang took a closer look at them, he found that they all looked radiant and in good condition. Luo Dajiang and Tai Qingcang seemed to have shaved their beards deliberately, making them look a few years younger. However, they were not in the mood to make fun of him. They just glanced at each other, checked each other, and then walked forward. The thick fog was getting closer and closer. At this moment, it was almost within reach. Yunyang took a step forward and made contact with the thick fog, but he immediately felt a strange feeling. At the same time, the illusory celestial luck banner appeared behind him and stood in the air. The next moment, the illusory celestial luck banner flew into the thick fog like a swallow returning to its nest. Immediately after, a wave of dense fluctuations suddenly appeared in the thick fog. With a sudden sound, a door completely made of clouds and fog suddenly appeared. On the door, there were a few words formed by dark clouds, "Residence of 9 Supremes. 10 Victories Challenge Qualification. Admission, 1st floor, Qualification Zone." It was the first time for everyone in the residence of 9 Supremes, including Yunyang, to see such a strange phenomenon. It was obviously full of hazy clouds and mist, but it could form a door out of thin air and condense words out of thin air. As far as the crowd could see, it was obviously not controlled by someone but operated by mystical qi. They could not help but marvel and praise it. The crowd walked through the door one by one. Lin Xiaoro, who was walking at the back, turned her head at the right time and saw that the door behind her had disappeared as she walked through it. There was only a thick layer of fog behind her that she could not see through at all. Beneath her feet was a continuous passage that led to an unknown place. As they moved forward, the passage kept extending forward. Yunyang deliberately sped up slightly, but the passage also extended faster, not appearing to be constrained by Yunyang's acceleration. It was a marvelous sight. Ever since Yunyang was in the Tianxian continent, he had been used to being in a disadvantageous position and was extremely cautious about unknown environments. Now that he was in an unknown territory, he knew that there should be no danger, but he instinctively glanced around to confirm the current environment and atmosphere. Now that he was in a strange place, he naturally had his own ways to adapt to the situation. He immediately split out a cloud form divine ability that he hadn't used for a long time and tried to fuse with the surrounding clouds and mist. He hoped that he could use this to test the scope of the current strange realm of clouds and mist and whether there was someone else controlling it. However, although Yunyang felt that the cloud manifestation had merged with the surrounding fog without any barrier, he did not gain anything more. Everything around him was still hazy. He could not hear a single sound or feel anything. He could not even feel whether he was stepping on soil or a mountain path. Even the road under his feet was made of fog and clouds. Chapter 1069. Yunyang sighed inwardly. It turned out that his cultivation base of manifestation powers was still shallow. Otherwise, even if he could not reverse control the fog in front of him, he could at least get a glimpse of the boundary of this realm. What reassured Yunyang, however, was that although the fog did not give him any feedback, there was a faint sense of malice. However, there was a faint feeling that didn't contain any evil aura being born bit by bit. This meant that at least for now, the cloudy mist otherworldly realm didn't have the slightest ill intent towards them. After walking for more than 2 hours, Yunyang estimated that they had walked no less than 200 miles, even if their pace varied from fast to slow. As soon as the thought occurred to him, a bright light suddenly shone in front of them. They were now in a tent. When they exited the tent and turned around, they saw 3 words written on it, Residence of 9 Supremes. In front of them was a vast square. The square was surrounded by tents like this. From afar, they looked like big buns. Upon closer inspection, there were names on the tents, such as Beast King Sect, Thousand Sword Sect, Divine Saber League, Emerald Cloud Sect, 7 Star Mountain, 3E Sect, 4 Directions Sect, Great Dragon Flag, and so on. Many sects participating in the Celestial Luck Banner competition had gathered here, and the scene was spectacular. Could all these sects be qualified for 10 victories? Shi Wuchen sucked in a cold breath. Although the Demiurge Flawed 10 were all experienced martial artists who had traveled the world for many years, the sects they knew, or the sects that often troubled them, had at least lower-class celestial luck banners. In this world, there were only a few sects that had celestial luck banners. Therefore, although Shi Wuchen and the others had some plans for the celestial luck banner competition, they still did not expect that there were so many sects in the world. And this was not the entire bound of universe. The Sacred Heart Palace, one of the 4 forces under the East Celestial Palace, already had so many sections. How many sects were there in the entire bound of universe? It was an unimaginably astronomical number. Looking around, there were no less than 500 sects in the surroundings. Each of them had defeated at least 10 sects without celestial luck banners before they were qualified to be here. Did that not mean that there would be at least more than 5,000 sects competing for a spot in the celestial luck banner battle this time? This kind of cruelty was simply unimaginable and horrifying. The so-called thousands of soldiers and horses crossing a single log bridge was probably just like this. What's more, this single log bridge could only be crossed once, and it was the kind where only one person could cross. Randomly assigned opponents. A set of rules suddenly appeared in the tent. Everyone hurriedly looked over, not daring to be the slightest bit negligent. Then, someone could be heard cursing, "What the hell is that residence of 9 Supremes? So many sects have come here a month in advance just to wait for them. I didn't expect them to really come in the last few days. How arrogant they are. I'm so King pissed." As soon as this person began to scold, many people responded in unison. It was obvious that everyone was full of complaints, extremely dissatisfied with the late arrival of the residents of 9 Supremes. Yunyang stared at the rules and said disapprovingly, "What does it have to do with the residents of 9 Supremes that all of you are impatient and have come to wait in advance? Don't tell me that we don't need to wait for a month if we come a month in advance? Do you think that the battle will start earlier just because we came early? That's all you're talking about." His words were not polite at all. His voice even spread out leisurely and spread throughout the entire place. It caused a new round of uproar. How arrogant! What the hell? I challenge him. Yunyang sneered. The residence of 9 Supremes is right here. If you're not satisfied, you can come and challenge us when the battle starts later. However, you'd better prepare a coffin before you come, or else, your corpse will be left in the wilderness if you die. All the sects who heard this were infuriated. They could not hold back. Fight! When the battle starts, the residents of 9 Supremes will be mine. Ours. Too arrogant. I'll take down these bastards from the residents of 9 Supremes myself. Yunyang snorted and turned to look at the rules calmly, smiling. I see. The disciples, Wuxia, and the rest looked at Yunyang as if they were looking at a god. Master is really domineering and unparalleled in the world. So handsome. So handsome. Wuxia and the others, on the other hand, felt that they were known as whetstones, but compared to Yunyang, their ability to attract hatred paled in comparison. The difference was like the difference between cloud and mud, like heaven and earth. The 10 of them had been in the martial world for half their lives, but all their enemies added up would not be as many as Yunyang's words today. The rules of the qualification battle for the first round of the Celestial Luck Banner battle were simple. Only one sect could challenge at a time, and the challenged must accept the challenge. No limit on casualties. No limit on fighting methods. No limit on the number of participants. In general, there was only one requirement: only one of the more than 500 sects present could advance to the next round of the Celestial Luck Banner battle. Obviously, there was only one implicit indicator of the rules: no gang fights, and there was no situation where several sects targeted one sect at the same time. One-on-one, at least on the surface, it was fair and just. As for when the two sects fought, if your sect only sent 3 people while the other sect sent 30, the result would be the same. Although your sect didn't have that many people to make up the numbers, you deserved it. It was simple and straightforward, and it was obvious at a glance. After reading this rule, Yunyang felt relieved. Victory was in his hands, and he no longer had any doubts. The battle would begin the morning after tomorrow and end within 3 days. This was tantamount to saying that the more than 500 sects here would cripple all the sects except themselves within 3 days. In all fairness, the rule was not harsh. After all, there were more than 500 sects participating in the battle. Time was tight to decide the winner within 3 days, so it was only natural that the rule was harsh. But if it was not harsh, those who had the courage and confidence to participate in the battle of the Celestial Luck Banners must have considerable strength. In a fight between experts, it was easy to judge who was superior and who would rise and fall. Although more than 500 sects were fighting for the championship, there was still enough time after the layers of competition. Yunyang, who saw this rule, was even more relieved. As long as there was no gang fight and the possibility of being targeted by multiple sects, Yun Yang was confident that he could win in a one-on-one battle of real strength. Otherwise, how could he covet the item above the lower-class celestial luck banner? How arrogant! Chapter 1070. Yun Xiaofan took her junior brothers and sisters out to familiarize themselves with the venue, while the eldest senior sister took her junior brothers and sisters out. Naturally, she had to put on airs. Especially with Yun Yang's action plan in front of them, she had to put on more airs than usual. It was not enough to describe her arrogance. Therefore, among the 10 first-generation disciples of the residents of 9 Supremes, only 4 or 5 of them were considered adults, while the rest were little boys and girls with childish faces. Led by a girl who looked the shortest, they all walked out with their noses in the air. This place looks really good. Exactly. Eldest senior sister, if this place is occupied by us in the future, we'll have to pay for it. Can I bring my junior brothers and sisters over to play? Can you be a little more mindful? Can you change your bad habit of saying whatever you think? Yun Xiaofan raised her nose and said, "We're here for the celestial luck banner. Do you think this is our backyard? After we defeat these 500 sects, we'll go back. Also, this little territory in front of us isn't that big. The battlefield that belongs to us should be on the 2nd or 3rd level." Eldest senior sister is right. She has great foresight. She is truly a strategically advantageous person. Eldest senior sister, can we really win this time? There are so many people in the surrounding sects. Look at how useless you are. Yun Xiaofan said in a loud voice, "Put your heart at ease. Don't you see that although there are so many of them, they are all useless and can't even withstand a blow from me? I reckon they are only a little stronger than those so-called elite disciples we've dealt with before. I'm invincible, and I'm the only one who can win." Eldest senior sister, are they really that weak? He clearly looked so fierce and imposing. Ha ha ha. In your eyes, they are actually fierce? Very imposing? Tui. Look at how cowardly they are. They don't even dare to fight back after being scolded like that. Are they not qualified to be our opponents? Eldest senior sister is right. Eldest senior sister is wise and valiant, not losing to any man. Yun Xiaofan grew more and more complacent, but with her current image, she was not convincing at all. She seemed more like a spoiled young lady who only knew herself and not others. She was ignorant of the affairs of the world and only knew how to brag. Even a clay figurine would have a bit of rustic air. How could the various sects present endure such arrogant, despotic, and insufferably arrogant youths? All of them were instantly angered to the point their lips turned green and their faces turned pale, and they started cursing furiously. What a bunch of immature little things. How dare you bark here? What are you? The entire residence of 9 Supremes is a pile of trash. You're full of nonsense and boasting. If it were not for the fact that the time for the battle had not arrived and no one dared to make a move, it would be strange if the residents of 9 Supremes juniors were not ganged up on. Yun Xiaofan was not offended at all. Instead, she burst out laughing and said proudly, "Look, we've scolded them so much, but they dare not come out and only know how to curse. Humph, what's so great about cursing people? If you have the ability, come out and fight us." Xiaofan laughed wildly. "That's right. Come and hit me if you dare. Come and hit me if you have the guts." His voice was even more arrogant and high-pitched than Yun Xiaofan's. The eyes of the people from the surrounding sects were spewing fire. Hit you? Hitting you is already a light punishment. If it weren't for the rules and now is not the time to fight, you would have been killed by us, in both body and soul. This is not the end. When the real battle begins, I will kill everyone in the residence of 9 Supremes, kill every single one of them, and wipe out all their clans. Yun Xiaofan led her junior brothers and sisters across the street in a swaggering manner, and wherever they passed, they were met with fierce glares filled with hatred. This place is called Wan. What sect? How do you pronounce the word in the middle? Wanlan sect. The word in the middle is Nianlan, eldest senior sister. It's obviously an unknown sect. What kind of name does it have? What kind of thing is this? Sect names are the most catchy and popular, and it's taboo to have a rare word in the name. Just by looking at this name, this sect is destined to be gone. It's inevitable that it will be beaten to a pulp. Perhaps it will be in this battle. Eldest senior sister is right. Treasure it and leave an impression. You won't be able to see it again in the future. What are you looking at? Hurry up and cherish the fact that you're about to leave. You're still looking at us? Come out and hit me if you have the guts. The people from Wanlan sect were so angry that their livers were swelling. This is Wanlan sect. TSK, what a lousy name. It's even more despicable than that Wanlan sect. I'll kill them sooner or later. Yes. Wanlan is despicable. Their name and sect are all the same. What are you looking at? Come out and hit me if you have the guts. This is a good name, Mantis Blade. Ha ha ha. I can't believe there's such a name. Ha ha ha. I'm dying of laughter. Just like stepping on mantises, we can kill them one at a time. It's very convenient and fast. Yes, yes, yes. Eldest senior sister is right. What are you looking at? Come out and hit me if you have the guts. Yun Xiaofan led her junior brothers and sisters along the way. Every time they passed by a sect, they would stop and provoke them a little before continuing on their way. They walked leisurely as if they were on a sightseeing tour, and the phrase they said the most along the way was, "Come out and hit me if you have the guts." All the sects were so angry that their faces were swollen, their mouths were crooked, and their eyes were slanted. Not only did their livers hurt, but their hearts, livers, spleens, lungs, and kidneys were also hurting. Who was the one who taught these unlucky disciples? Why were they so hateful? Who is the Supreme Lord of the residents of 9 Supremes? He must be tired of living. Aren't you afraid that everyone will gang up on you if you provoke so much hatred? Do you want to make the whole world your enemy? They were right about one thing. At least, Yun Yang was not afraid of making enemies at this juncture. After all, the rules were there. Only one-on-one duels were allowed here, so what was there to be afraid of? What's there to be afraid of? Shouldn't we be the ones who should be afraid? Not all the sects did nothing. Some of their disciples came out to follow Yun Xiaofan and the others, cursing them all the way. But, how could their psychological endurance be compared with Yun Xiaofan and the others, who had been baptized by the darkness of human nature? Not only did it not work, but it also made the whole first level more like a vegetable market. This sect, Yun Xiaofan and the others turned a deaf ear to them and kept cursing along the way. Everything is allowed except for fighting. Does that mean we can use our mouths? If there's no one blocking our way, we'll walk smoothly. If there's someone blocking our way, we'll still break through. Everything is just going with the flow. Anyway, you don't dare to make the first move. Because those who make the first move will be immediately expelled by the officials of Mount Pentatir and lose the right to challenge this time. All these situations eventually led to only one voice echoing in the square, "Come and hit me if you have the guts." Chapter 1071. At the same time, Yun Yang's clear voice came from afar and could be heard from afar. Let's discuss the battle plan. Boss, just arrange it. We'll all follow your orders. In fact, there's nothing to arrange. Look at these sections. Except for the large number of people, there's nothing else to recommend them. In my eyes, they're just plates of dishes, chicken feathers for a duster. How can they stand in the same place to compete for the challenge qualification with us, the residents of 9 Supremes? Boss, you're right. You've touched my heart. The few of you better remember this. Once the battle starts, we'll take care of all of them as quickly as possible. I don't want to let trouble get in my way for too long. I'm already having a hard time holding it in now. Understood. Since we can kill in this qualification battle, casualties are not prohibited here. Killing all these guys is the most convenient and safest way. It's a rare place that's not restricted by the heaven law of the bound of universe. If we don't do whatever we want now, when will we? Yes. A bunch of ants, ha 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 ha, oh ho ho ho, there was a burst of laughter. Everyone who heard the conversation from the other sects was so furious that their eyes were about to spit fire. What kind of people are the residents of 9 Supremes from top to bottom, old and young? Is there no decent person in the entire sect? Are you going to piss us all off with your words before the battle? Can't you be more arrogant and rampant? A clear voice came through the air, listen up, people of the residents of 9 Supremes. We're all here to participate in the qualification battle. Aren't you being too unscrupulous? Yunyang said faintly, we've already come here, and we're even more sure that everyone here is an enemy except for ourselves. Why should I be kind? Isn't it stupid for me to be polite to the enemy? What's more, who do you think you are? How can I be polite? The clear voice could no longer conceal the towering anger in his heart as he said coldly, residents of 9 Supremes, I'm Li Wuying, the leader of the Wangue sect. I hereby announce that 3 days later, the Wangue sect that I lead will challenge your residents of 9 Supremes first. Victory and defeat will be decided, and life and death will be decided. Yunyang said faintly, the sect leader of Thousand Ghosts sect has made a wise choice. You can make the Thousand Ghosts sect live up to its name. Li Wuying roared, good. Good. Let's see if our Thousand Ghosts sect will turn your residents of 9 Supremes into a ghostly land, or if our Thousand Ghosts sect will perish and sink into hell. Yunyang laughed in disdain. Residents of 9 Supremes, we, the Thousand Sword sect, will never forgive you. Yunyang's gaze flickered as he burst out laughing. Which one of you wants to go against the residents of 9 Supremes? Why don't you report your names? This seat will experience them one by one later. There was not even time for an awkward silence. The names of the sects rang out one after another like popping beans. Yunyang burst out laughing. You are just a bunch of rabble after all. There is no order to them at all. Where is the demeanor of the contenders for the celestial luck banners? Only the residents of 9 Supremes has the brilliance of the heavens and the brilliance of the celestial luck. The crowd was boiling. Shi Wuchen and Luo Dujiang exchanged a glance, both feeling amazed and ashamed of their own inferiority. Their boss's ability to provoke hatred was unparalleled. 10 disciples were shouting and swaggering outside, while their masters were mocking them from behind. In the first level, where the celestial luck banners were being held, more than 500 sects were all enemies, except for the people from the residents of 9 Supremes. Boss, we just need to sit still and wait for those who come to challenge us. As long as we hold on until the end, we will be able to advance smoothly. It is a foregone conclusion that the sects present will fight each other. Why do we have to make the whole world our enemy? Will it be superfluous and cause trouble for us? Lan Ruojuan expressed his confusion about Yunyang's actions. In fact, Lan Ruojuan was not the only one who thought this way. Everyone, including Shi Wuchen, were not afraid of battle, but they were still suspicious of Yunyang's current situation, where everyone was his enemy. They could not figure out what Yunyang was doing. Yunyang smiled and said, waiting for them to challenge us, taking advantage of the situation, and then advancing to the next level. This method is safe, but it is not suitable for us now. I'm afraid it will be difficult to get such an opportunity in the future. Opportunity? Please elaborate, boss. The current situation is exactly the opportunity that will be difficult to get in the future. The fundamental purpose of our participation in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banners this time is to obtain the Celestial Luck Banners and become the sect that owns them. Based on the current situation, the possibility of us advancing to the next level is basically in our hands. There is no doubt about it. But what happens after that? After that? What happens after that? Lan Ruojuan still did not catch the point of Yun Yang's argument. Yun Yang shook his head and said, after this battle, we have a great chance to become the sect that owns the Celestial Luck Banners, but at the same time, our opponents will inevitably become the sects that also own the Celestial Luck Banners. However, it is also a fact that our disciples, despite having a good cultivation base, are seriously lacking in combat experience. They also lack the temperament of the martial world. Oh. Boss, you mean? At this point, Lan Ruojuan had vaguely guessed the true meaning of Yun Yang's action. The others also understood it and nodded in agreement. Although it seems that everyone in the square is our enemy, have you carefully observed the people here? At least as far as I can see, no one and no sect is a match for us. Even the cultivation of some sect leaders is not as strong as Xiaofan and the others, said Wuxia with a smile. Since there can only be one winner in this round of battle, why don't we just put on a posture and lure the enemies to attack us, then defeat them all? Not only can we hone our disciples' combat experience and cultivate their own aura, but we can also end this battle as soon as possible. It's killing two birds with one stone. Why not? Yun Yang smiled and said, even if you don't provoke these people, they won't let you go. Why don't we just offend them all in one go? Haven't you noticed that among the 500 sects participating in this round, only one can actually go out alive? It's either they die or we die. This is a single-choice question. There's only life and death. Victory or defeat doesn't matter. Lan Ruojuan said, you don't have to be so extreme. What about those who admit defeat? Yun Yang shook his head slowly. Admit defeat? Absolutely no one will admit defeat or give up. This is a battle of destiny. No one will admit defeat or give up. They will only fight with their lives and do their best. Isn't the rule very clear? There's no resurrection in the qualification battle. Chapter 1072. Tai Qingcang laughed as he listened to the earth-shattering curses outside and the sounds of people gnashing their teeth as if they wanted to eat someone alive. In my opinion, this is the best. Put aside the children's concerns, and all of you, change your way of thinking. This is the epitome of the entire martial world. The people outside used to use you as whetstones, but now, they are the whetstones of our children. Do you understand what you should do later? Yes, you're right, big brother. Everyone thought about it and found that what Yun Yang said was true. When they came here, no matter how gentle and polite you were, the other party would still kill you. Because if they did not kill you, they could not advance. This was really a single-choice question, a situation of certain death. In fact, there was no such thing as offending or not. With this thought in mind, everyone was relieved, and their state of mind returned to peace. Only Yun Yang's eyes were still gleaming leisurely. At this moment, he was thinking about another problem, the more than 500 sects here. At the very least, there should be at least 10,000 people, right? If all these people were really dead, how much karmic energy could they provide to him? According to the ratio of 1 to 100 of Bound of Universe and Tianxian, would there be more than 1 million? Or more? This was the question. For 3 whole days, the residents of 9 Supreme's arrogant and domineering behavior had infuriated all the sects in the area. They were all eager to fight, eagerly looking forward to the arrival of the final battle. They swore to give the residents of 9 Supremes the most painful lesson on the day of the battle. 3 days passed in a blink of an eye. It was early in the morning on the day of the Battle of 9 Supremes, and the sky was still dark. A loud shout rang out suddenly, "People of the residence of 9 Supremes, come out and fight." Yunyang turned around, wrapped in a saber light, and rushed out first. Shi Wuchen and the others next to him shouted, "Let me do it. The first formation should be mine." "Boss, slow down. You don't need to do it, get out, get out. Get out quickly." How can he be so fast? It was a pity that Yunyang had already dashed out at the first instance. Only his voice echoed in everyone's ears, "Each of us will take turns. Once the 9 of us have finished our shifts, we'll send the disciples out to fight in pairs. We'll end each battle as quickly as possible and end this battle as soon as possible." Outside the door, a person was staring at the residence of 9 Supremes tense with a menacing look on his face. Ghostly chi emanated from him, and his face was pale as a sheet. In the night, he looked no different from a malicious ghost. There were more than 20 people behind him, and each of them had a similar appearance. None of them looked like humans. At first glance, it really looked like a group of ghosts had appeared, and the underworld had been emptied. The challenger this time was the Wangui sect. As soon as the battle began, they arrived. The residence of 9 Supremes. Our Wangui sect. Before the man's words echoed in the air, Yunyang had already charged over with his saber. Without a second word, he swung his saber right at the man's head. "A battle is a battle. Why are you wasting your breath? I don't have so much free time." The saber light was as bright as snow, quickly forming a dazzling galaxy in the air. It fell with a loud boom, dazzling and extremely beautiful. The saber light that appeared in the sky was hundreds of feet long, illuminating the entire place. With a loud bang, the leader of the Wangui sect was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. His counterattack with all his might was useless, and he and his sword were directly split into 2 halves by the brilliant saber light. The remaining force of the saber light swept out, and the saber power was still as sharp as before, cutting 7 to 8 people from the Wangui sect into 2 halves. In terms of saber technique alone, Yunyang's saber did not have any style at all. It was just a simple straight slash, and it could hardly be called a saber technique. Whether it was a single saber, a long sword, a long saber, or a heavy sword, any weapon with a sharp edge could do it. However, the power was astonishing and appalling, far beyond the imagination of the cultivators present. As soon as the saber slashed out, cries of agony filled the air. Then, with another slash, Yunyang had already wiped out all the enemies. With a clang, Yunyang sheathed his saber and shouted, "Go, collect the spoils." All the people of the Wangui sect had been turned into smoke under Yunyang's 2 slashes. The 2 slashes were like thunderbolts. All the people watching felt a chill run down their spines, from the soles of their feet to the back of their heads. Was this the strength of the residents of 9 Supremes? Sun Mingxiu, Bai Yexing, Hu Xiaofan, and the other disciples rushed out. At this moment, there was no one alive on the Wangui sect's side. Corpses were everywhere, and all the ghosts had become real ghosts. Sun Mingxiu and the others suppressed the discomfort in their hearts and searched through the corpses. They carefully collected all the cultivation resources, weapons, and especially the spatial rings. Only after putting them away did they turn around and head back. When the disciples looked at Yunyang again, it was as if they were looking at an immortal from heaven. A sect that was qualified and strong enough to participate in the Celestial Luck Qualification Tournament had been completely wiped out by Yunyang's 2 slashes, and they had not even finished reporting their names. How could the gap in strength not be frightening? Meng Qianshan, Duan Mufeng, and Lu Changman were slightly slower, so they did not collect the spoils. They were reduced to cleaning up the scene and moving the corpses aside, mocking themselves for being the typical example of a thankless effort. Yunyang, who had wiped out the enemies with 2 slashes, turned around with his hands clasped behind his back. His purple robe was still clean, without any wrinkles or bloodstains. Then, he walked slowly into the tent. "Wait! The Thousand Swords sect has come to challenge us." Yun Yang ignored them. The power of Yun Yang's 2 slashes was beyond the imagination of all the sects present. The combined combat power of the Thousand Swords sect was not higher than that of the Thousand Ghosts sect, so it was unwise to challenge them so impatiently. It was no different from courting death. However, as Yun Yang had said before, this was a battle of life and death. The saying that life and death must be decided was already deeply rooted in the hearts of everyone present, so the battle was inevitable. The power of Yun Yang's 2 slashes was shocking, and he pretended to be relaxed afterward. Who knew if he was not pretending to be calm to confuse the crowd? Perhaps Yun Yang had exhausted all his strength after those 2 slashes. Even if he had not reached that stage, the higher-ups of the Thousand Swords sect had already decided to take advantage of the subtle moment when Yun Yang's 2 slashes had exhausted most of his strength to launch a strong attack, fighting for a chance of survival in the midst of death. Unfortunately, no matter how good their plan was, it was all in vain. Although Yun Yang ignored their challenge, Shi Wuchen had already responded with his sword, a disdainful sneer on his face. He had basically replicated what Yun Yang had done earlier. Facing the Thousand Swords sect, he had only used 2 slashes before the Thousand Swords sect ceased to exist. 2 slashes, 2 swords, 2 sects destroyed. In this qualification battle, the residents of 9 Supremes could be said to be invincible. Today, we've arrived at the Hengdian Film City. The filming of our online movie, Fengling Tian Chuan, has officially started. This is a short story that I wrote. Yes, it's the few drafts that I wrote when I started the Supreme and World-conquering novels. Each draft has 40 to 50,000 words, and with some slight changes, it's become a short story. At that time, I wrote that it was useless and thought that it was useless, so I haven't released it for several years. But to be able to come this far, I have to say that my luck is not bad. Heh. I estimate that the filming will be completed before the Spring Festival, and then I'll announce the good news to everyone. Many names of the Feng family's disciples are used in it. The main character's team is called the Feng Family Army. There are also names like Mo Haikong, Jiao Shi, and so on. Today is the 4th update to make up for yesterday. Chapter 1073. However, the challengers were still coming in an endless stream. What if Yun Yang and Shi Wuchen were the only experts in residence of 9 Supremes? What if they were already exhausted and no longer as valiant as before? However, Luo Dujiang and the others did the same, wiping out the challengers' sects in 2 or 3 moves. For a moment, residents of 9 Supremes had a winning streak and was the best in the field. Yun Yang sat in the tent with his eyes slightly closed, not saying a word. It was as if his mind was wandering and he had forgotten about everything around him. In fact, he was feeling the peculiar atmosphere of the air of karma that kept flying in, and there were many thoughts in his mind. The current accumulation of the air of karma was unprecedentedly thick and strong. Usually, the number of martial artists outside was at most 100 ordinary villains in Tianxian continent, even if it was a considerable number. But in this realm, the weight was obviously much higher. It seems that these fellows have done a lot of evil things when they set up their sections. The bound of universe still has its restrictions, or perhaps the people in the sects have long found a way to deal with and avoid it. Yun Yang watched as the clouds of karmic energy flew in and Emmy absorbed them in the space, chirping in delight. What's going on today? Why is there such a rich harvest? Ayaya, it turned out that Yun Yang was right. From the beginning of the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, the night was still dark, and almost nothing could be seen. It was not until they had fought a dozen sects in a row that the sky began to brighten slightly. Of course, it was also because Yun Yang, Shi Wuchen, and the others were so powerful that they killed their opponents in a few moves, so the time was naturally shorter. However, after the dozen rounds of battles, residents of 9 Supremes had not lost a single person, and they had easily defeated their opponents in each battle. The latecomers no longer dared to take advantage of this situation. Instead, they wanted others to go first while they waited. After all, the corpses that had been piled up like a mountain next to residents of 9 Supreme Station were shocking to the eye. How could they not be afraid? Although they had thought that the residents of 9 Supremes must have some tricks up its sleeves for being so arrogant, who would have thought that the residents of 9 Supremes would be so ferocious? Just when the latecomers were hesitant and no one dared to challenge them directly, the residents of 9 Supreme sent out their young disciples to accept the challenge. They were all little girls and young boys, so young and immature that they could not help but grow bolder. Go! Kill them all! Break the residents of 9 Supreme's wings! The first to fight were Yun Xiaofan and Lu Changman, the first and last among the top 10 disciples. Naturally, it was the first time for both of them to face such a battle where they were outnumbered. Therefore, they behaved very cautiously at the beginning, holding back their strength to be safe. But as the fight went on, they found, what kind of sect was this? They were simply too weak. Even if it wasn't as easy as flipping one's hand, it was still very simple. The so-called elders and sect masters of the opposing sect were probably even weaker than the dozens of junior brothers and junior sisters who had yet to come out of the sect. How could they even be worth mentioning? They exchanged a glance, and as soon as their thoughts were confirmed, their confidence soared. Then, they no longer held back and began to kill. Their sect leader had said that they would not leave anyone alive. The battle lasted less than a quarter of an hour, and the sect they were facing was already cleaned up. Furthermore, this was because the two of them didn't dare to go all out, which was why the battle had been delayed. However, the two little fellows' behavior after the battle was over was a little biased. Instead of cleaning up the battlefield, they began to vomit. They were still young after all, and it was fine for them to focus on the battle just now. But now, looking at the mountains of corpses and seas of blood they had created, they could not help but feel worried. The visual and psychological impact was very serious, and it made the two little fellows vomit all over the place. Even when the second battle was over and Bai Yexing and Duanmu Feng returned, they were still vomiting. Bai Yexing and Duanmu Feng's reaction was much better than Yun Xiaofan's. They were just a little pale, but nothing else. In the third battle, Hu Xiaofan and Meng Qianshan returned. Meng Qianshan's face was also pale, but Hu Xiaofan looked as if nothing had happened. It was as if he had done something very ordinary and insignificant. Round after round of battles were over. By the time it was early morning, residents of 9 Supremes had defeated and destroyed 23 groups of sects that came to challenge them, and none of them were injured or killed. This achievement was secondary. The key was that the efficiency of annihilating the enemy was too shocking. It was eye-catching and soul-stirring. In fact, it was an exaggeration to say that no one in residents of 9 Supremes was injured, because after the battle, Yun Xiaofan, Lu Changman, Lin Xiaoro, and Cheng Jiejia huddled together and vomited. Their limbs were sore and their combat strength was not fully recovered, so it was more accurate to say that they were slightly injured. While frowning at this, Yun Yang made an arrangement that seemed a little unreasonable. Seeing that another sect had come to challenge them, Yun Yang ordered Yun Xiaofan and Lu Changman to fight again. He also made it clear that there would be no rest after this battle, and the two of them would fight the next group of sections. They would come back to rest when they stopped vomiting. Of course, if they were killed by the enemy, they could rest forever. This method of fighting poison with poison turned out to be very effective. The effect was immediate and remarkable. After 3 rounds of battles, although Yun Xiaofan and Lu Changman's faces were pale, their foreheads were drenched in cold sweat, and their stomachs were uncomfortable, they had gradually overcome this negative feeling and stopped vomiting. Seeing that their condition had improved, Yun Yang replaced them with Cheng Jiejia and Lin Xiao. Cheng Jiejia and Lin Xiao's psychological quality was even worse than Yun Xiaoxin and Lu Changmen's. After 4 rounds of battles, they still could not help but vomit. When they fought the 5th round, although they won, they were already flustered, but Yun Yang still forced them to continue the battle. In the next 2 rounds, the crowd saw the 2 female disciples in danger several times, and some were even slightly injured, but Yun Yang was still indifferent and insisted on his original intention. Even Kong Luoyue's rescue was intercepted by Yun Yang. No one is allowed to intervene. Do you think what I said before was just a joke? Either you kill all the enemies and return in triumph, and you're not allowed to vomit anymore. Or you'll be killed and sleep forever, and we'll collect your body. There are only these 2 ways. If they make a mistake and are killed because of their soft-heartedness, that's their fate, and it's none of our business. Fortunately, although Cheng Jiejia and Lin Xiao were surrounded by danger, they still defeated the enemies again and again. Covered in blood, they stood in the residence of 9 Supremes' camp again, and their faces had turned from pale to cold. In such a short time, the 2 girls had quickly completed their transformation. Although they were not cold-blooded, they had become cold-hearted. The sun was high up in the sky. Yun Yang, Shi Wuchen, and the others were sitting in the tent drinking tea leisurely. It was because there were only 10 disciples guarding outside, and it was more than enough for Yun Xiaoxin to arrange the formation to fight against the challenging sections. You're the eldest senior sister, and this is your responsibility. You'll command and arrange the formation. You won't? It doesn't matter. You've commanded wrongly, and it's your responsibility if they die. It's your incompetence that killed them. At this moment, Yun Xiaoxin was extremely nervous. Her heart was in her throat at all times, and her little face was taut. She was so serious and cautious that she was almost sick. Carefully observing every enemy that came to invade, calculating the strength of every person from every sect, then comparing them with their own junior brothers and sisters, then making the most exquisite and most meticulous arrangements. Boss, you're pushing too hard. Shi Wuchen felt a little sorry for her. The martial world is the most ruthless. If you want to grow as fast as possible, you can only go through the most extreme pressure and training. If we push them now, even if we make some mistakes, the strength of these sects is obviously weaker than Yun Xiaoxin and the others. Even if they are in danger, they can still turn the situation around. But if we don't take advantage of this atmosphere to train something, when we face the expert sects in the future, that will be the real loss. When that time comes, it's not something we can control. Yun Yang's eyes were full of certainty. He was sure that his method was correct. Perhaps for Yun Xiaoxin, the process was too cruel, but it was something she had to go through. The martial world was a cruel place, and it would not allow one to carefully protect it like cultivating heaven and earth treasures in a greenhouse. If she could train it, she could train it. If she couldn't, she could only be replaced by the latecomers. After all, it was her own incompetence that had nothing to do with others. Yun Yang's judgment was obviously accurate and without the slightest mistake. Among the sects competing with residents of 9 Supremes, there was really no one whose strength could compare to it. In this realm, no matter how infuriated the residents of 9 Supremes had been, it was not just one sect fighting against all the other sections. In fact, many sects in every direction of this realm were fighting against each other with all their might, fighting to the death. This was the truest portrayal of the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner. Otherwise, how could there be enough time for more than 500 sects to fight each other in just 3 days? The Celestial Luck Banner. The object that symbolized the qualification for the Celestial Luck Banner was hovering in the sky above this realm. It was also because of its existence that all the sects and people present were fighting for it. In just a short morning, the square was already covered with blood and battle cries were deafening. More than 50 sects had disappeared from this realm forever. So many people are dying in this realm just for a qualification. Is it really worth it? Besides, even if they get the qualification, they may not be able to defeat those who really have the celestial luck. Lan Ruojuan sighed with mixed emotions. This is the celestial luck. Yun Yang's eyes were deep as he said, everyone has the celestial luck, but not everyone really has it. In the face of such a situation, the wisest choice is to stay safe, go home, marry a wife, and live the rest of your life away from the martial world. As long as you don't covet the celestial luck and only seek to spend the rest of your life in peace, you can live a peaceful and carefree life. However, if you have the slightest bit of greed and want to be above others, you can only kill your way through the mountains of corpses and seas of blood. In fact, all the sects other than the martial world are like this, no matter which profession it is. This is another interpretation of the saying that different paths lead to the same destination. What we're fighting for now is who the final celestial luck belongs to. Only by seizing the celestial luck will we understand better that different celestial luck is actually different. To obtain a stronger celestial luck, we can only fight again, snatch again, and occupy again. This path will never have an end. Perhaps, it's even more profound than the vast martial world, it's truly endless. Listening to Yun Yang's words, Shi Wuchen and the others nodded silently. Kong Luoyue smiled and said, "What you said makes sense, boss, but it's too far in the future. At least for now, the residence of Nine Supreme's ability is undoubtedly unparalleled. Compared to us, these sects are completely incomparable." Yun Yang's eyes were half-lidded as he said faintly, "Our purpose of coming here this time has never stopped at seizing the qualification, but to directly seize the celestial luck. Even with our current ability, we're confident that we can defeat those sects with lower-class celestial luck banners. It'll be abnormal if we encounter a strong opponent in this qualification battle. We should have swept through the first qualification battle. What we're doing now is already too inefficient." Indeed, the residence of Nine Supreme's ability was far beyond their peers. Otherwise, how could Lin Xiaoro and Cheng Jiejia fight 5 rounds consecutively and win? If Yun Yang and the others attacked separately, it would not be difficult for the residents of Nine Supremes to wipe out 100 sects now. This was the reality, the truest and cruelest reality. By noon, the residents of Nine Supremes had gone through another 25 challenges. When they looked up, the sun was already high in the sky. It was noon. The entire square was filled with the meandering river of blood that flowed like a trickle. The pungent smell of blood was so strong that it made it hard for people to breathe, and their mouths and noses were filled with the smell of rust. However, just as the sun moved to the top of their heads, with a strange whoosh and a surge of white mist, all the corpses, all the blood, and all the traces of battle disappeared in an instant. It was as if those people, the corpses, and the blood that covered the ground had never existed before. Fivefold Peak is magical indeed. Yun Yang sighed softly. Perhaps in the eyes of others, these people might have been resurrected and sent out. In spite of this, Yun Yang understood that those people were indeed dead, dead beyond all possibility of death. The karmic chi that he had obtained could not deceive anyone, it was difficult for the dead to be born if they were not real. The many weapons, resources, and even spatial rings that he had seized were real as well. All of these existed in the hands of the winners. When the sky turned dark in the afternoon, the corpses, limbs, blood, and heads that had been produced once again disappeared strangely. After a day of fierce battles, the number of sects that survived was less than 100. Updated late today. I'm in Hengdian. GT. Chapter 1074. There was more than enough time for the 500 sects to fight for 3 days to decide the winner, but the progress should not have been so fast. Now, however, with the addition of the residents of Nine Supremes, a super-powerful sect that almost had a cheat code. They had no opponents and could defeat their opponents in the blink of an eye, which greatly accelerated the process of the qualification battle. It was because of such an atmosphere that, except for the residents of 9 Supremes, all the other sects were injured and so tired that they could almost fall asleep while walking. Originally, the sects were thinking of resting for a night to recover and prepare for the next day. Unexpectedly, at Yun Yang's order, the residents of 9 Supremes took the initiative to attack for the first time. Overnight, more than 60 of the existing sects were destroyed. The route of attack was almost from this end of the square, sweeping all the way. The screams of the dying martial artists rang throughout the night. On the morning of the second day, people from 7 sects took the initiative to leave, their faces ashen. At this point, there were less than 30 sects left in the qualification battle. There were less than 11 sects in this huge square, and they seemed abnormally lonely. All the sects that were slaughtered and those that had withdrawn had their tents disappear as soon as they were defeated. It was even more magical than the disappearing corpses and blood. From beginning to end, Yun Yang had used his divine sense to observe and sense with his manifestation powers, but he did not find any trace of power controlling or presiding over the competition in this realm. It was as if all this had happened spontaneously on this mountain, and had nothing to do with anyone. It seemed to be a little too high level, at least beyond Yun Yang's current understanding. The next afternoon, 30 sects were reduced to 11, and when night fell, there were only 6 left. On the third morning, there were only 2 sects left in this realm that had participated in the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner. The residents of 9 Supremes and the Wild Saber sect. The 2 sects confronted each other. The Wild Saber sect had sent a total of 35 people to this qualification battle, but only 17 of them were still alive. 18 of them had been buried here, and more than half of them were dead. As for the remaining 17 people, all of them were injured and riddled with scars. They were exhausted to the point that they couldn't even lift their hands. Yun Yang led his disciples out in a single file, watching the other party silently. Compared to the poor state of the Wild Saber sect, the clothes of the residents of 9 Supremes were spotless, as if they had just taken a bath and changed their clothes. Seeing the arrival of the residents of 9 Supremes, feeling their powerful aura and explosive fighting spirit, the leader of the Wild Saber sect laughed bitterly, tears streaming down his face. The residents of 9 Supremes is indeed formidable and impressive. The Mad Blade sect master was a tall and sturdy man. His eyes were filled with nostalgia as he looked at the disciples around him and said, "Our Mad Blade sect, for today's battle, has endured for 27 years. In the past, when we fought against Kangwu Union, we always had the upper hand. I thought it was expected and reasonable that we could win the Celestial Luck Banner in this battle of celestial luck. Unexpectedly, there's always someone stronger than you." He looked at Yun Yang and said cleanly, "Trying your best is no different from throwing your life away. How foolish. We admit defeat in this battle. Sect leader Yun, you won't be so ruthless, right?" Yun Yang, Shi Wuchen, and the others did not conceal their auras. For the first time, their powerful auras were released in unison. The other party was also a high-level cultivator, so how could he not sense it? With such a huge gap in strength, even if their side did not lose any members and their strength was complete, they would still be far behind. Such a gap could not be made up for by risking their lives. Fighting without any regard for the consequences wasn't just courting death, it was extremely foolish. It was truly a foolish death. "Have a safe journey, everyone." Yun Yang said warmly, "What are you talking about, brother? Our original intention was only for the Celestial Luck Banner. Since the outcome has been decided and you gave up voluntarily, how could we force you too much? When we meet again in the martial world, we'll be friends." He smiled miserably and looked at the huge square with nostalgia. He murmured, "Where the heavenly fate is, where the heavenly fate is." Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood and waved his hand. I admit defeat. Let's go. Before he finished speaking, his tall and sturdy body fell to the ground. His spirit seemed to have completely disappeared at this moment. From today onwards, Wild Saber sect will seal itself for 100 years. I hope that after 100 years, there will still be outstanding people among the later generations, and then we'll have the same thought again. With tears in his eyes, the man from Wild Saber sect left these desolate words and was sent out by the strange power of the fifth peak. At this point, only the people from Residence of Nine Supremes were left in the square on the first floor. Yunyang stood with his hands behind his back, his thoughts distant. After a long time, he murmured to himself, "Celestial luck, celestial luck." However, there was a cheer behind him. We've won. With the forfeit of Wild Saber sect, the qualification battle for the Celestial Luck banner came to an end. The white fog at the edge of the square finally changed again. Gradually, it rolled and quickly condensed into a path that led upward. A white cloud drifted past Yunyang and the people from Residence of Nine Supremes, as if it was leading the way. Then, it slowly drifted forward. Knowing that they had been guided by the strange phenomenon because of their victory, the people from Residence of Nine Supremes were all beaming with joy as they walked happily toward the path. Only Yunyang felt an inexplicable sense of melancholy, but his feet still followed the movements of the people and walked forward step by step. Suddenly, the desolate and despairing voice of Wild Saber sect's leader before he left rang in his mind. "Celestial luck, celestial luck." There was also the look of despair in his eyes, the look of numbness and despair in the eyes of everyone in Wild Saber sect. And the increasing number of corpses that had fallen under the sabers and swords of the people from Residence of Nine Supremes. "Wuchen, what do you think celestial luck is?" Sure. Wuchen, Luo Dajiang, and the others were walking forward with Yunyang, their hearts filled with joy. They were stunned when they heard this question out of the blue. How were they supposed to answer this question? There was no standard answer at all. With a faint smile on his face, Yunyang continued to walk forward like he was taking a leisurely stroll. "Do you think the process of fighting for celestial luck is too cruel?" As soon as Yunyang asked this question, not only Shi Wuchen, but all the teachers and masters of Residence of Nine Supremes fell into silence. No one answered. After a moment, Luo Dajiang took a soft breath and said in a low voice, "Do you think too many people have died in this battle, boss?" "Yes, I have this feeling. Before this, I focused on defeating the enemy and didn't think too much, and I didn't hold back in the battle for fear of leaving behind hidden dangers. But now that I think about it, although we have a clear conscience, we were still too bloodthirsty." Luo Dajiang's voice grew deeper. "Regarding this feeling, I have a different opinion from you, boss. As far as this battle is concerned, I really don't think it's cruel or unfair. On the contrary, I think it's very fair." Shi Wuchen nodded slightly in agreement. "Yes, although the process of this battle is bloody and cruel, it's still fair in its bones. It's just that the fittest survive, and the weak are eliminated while the strong are eliminated. Those sects who knew the situation would have withdrawn from the battle long ago, and those who forced themselves to continue are all holding on to the slightest bit of hope." Yunyang nodded silently. Tai Qingcang seemed to be interested as well. "I also think it's fair. This battle is fundamentally a competition between martial artists. Whether it's cruel or not, at least it gives them a chance to compete, and at the same time, they have the chance to give up. They can advance or retreat at will. How is it unfair? In my understanding, everything in the world is a microcosm of the flow of celestial luck. In the secular world, the dynasties fight for hegemony for the throne. It's normal for a general to succeed and fill up a mountain of bones. When an emperor ascends to the world, the number of people who died in the process of him achieving hegemony is more than 100,000 or 1,000,000. Whether it's the struggle for the future of cultivation, the struggle for hegemony, or the competition between all walks of life, it's all competition. This is the fight for celestial luck. It's a pity that Fatty Qian Duo is not here. Otherwise, he would have declared at length that the commercial war of the Shang family is equally cruel. Although there may not be mountains of corpses and seas of blood floating on the surface, the conspiracies and intrigues involved will only be better. Just to be able to step on others, they will resort to any means possible. Betrayal, deception, blackmail, and even coercion by force. All kinds of means are endless. As long as you can't think of it, there's nothing that can't happen. If you think deeper, even the most ordinary person, in order to survive in this world, who doesn't try their best to curry favor? However, there are too many people who curry favor, and they may not be able to achieve their goals throughout their lives. If we're talking about fairness, those people are even more unfair. Many people are already at the peak of their lives when they're born. For example, the sons of emperors, the descendants of dukes and marquises, or the sons of the richest. Ordinary people can't even reach the soles of their feet after working hard all their lives. Therefore, the world of ordinary people looks quiet and peaceful, with no obvious crisis, but the so-called absence of danger means that there's no fairness. Fairness has always been fought for at a price. Although the battle for the celestial luck banner is bloody and cruel, and it's not the end even if you win, and your life will be gone if you lose, there's a platform that provides a way for you to fight for it. It's not that you have no choice but to accept your fate before you fight. Luo Dujiang said with deep emotion, even though they know that the hope is slim, everyone is still reluctant to give up this little bit of hope. If you win, you'll have it. If you lose, you'll have nothing, just because you're not strong enough and lucky enough. That's unfair. Perhaps the people of the world look at the people of the martial arts world with a secular perspective and think that they're too stupid. Only when people are alive can they have a future. What's wrong with staying alive? It's better to live than to die. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of people have died for the so-called celestial luck banner that they can't eat or drink. But, are they really stupid? Everyone pursues different things. Whether they're stupid or not depends on the person. Other people use money to fight, power to fight, emotion to fight, intelligence to fight. But martial artists use their lives to fight. What they get is naturally different when the price is different. Money, power, and strategy. What they get in the end is nothing more than money, power, and status. But we martial artists fight with our lives. It's the path ahead, the celestial luck. Being alive is luck, and there's still a path ahead. Dying is fate, and dying prematurely in the middle of the path. There's no such thing as cruelty, and there's no such thing as fairness. From the perspective of ordinary people, martial artists are cruel and incomprehensible, but from the perspective of a martial artist, you'll only feel that it's reasonable. What's the big deal? It's nothing more than that. Everyone is the same, fighting with their lives, that's all. Shi Wuqian added coldly, the path of cultivation has always been rugged and difficult. If we don't fight with our lives, what should we fight with? Others are fighting with their lives, but we're delusional enough to not fight with our lives. Can we win? As soon as he said that, everyone burst out laughing. Only Yun Yang remained silent for a moment. After a pause, he guessed, do all the martial artists in the Bound of Universe think so? Tai Qingcang asked curiously, of course. In the Bound of Universe, only the strong are respected, and everything is decided by strength. Boss, don't you think so? Yun Yang chuckled and did not say anything else. To be honest, Yun Yang really did not think so. Born in the Tianxian continent, he always felt that everything in the Bound of Universe was very different from Tianxian, and there were many things that did not fit in with him. In fact, there were many times when Yun Yang was thinking about a problem. So many martial artists who did not know each other were killed and died just for a slot. Some martial artists who did not know each other would lose their lives just because of a word of quarrel. Yun Yang had always felt that this was too extreme. Was it really necessary? Although Yun Yang had gained more from this battle compared to the others, the large amount of karmic chi had proven that the deceased were definitely not as innocent as he had thought them to be. They might even have deserved to die, and their deaths were not to be regretted. However, how could one walk the martial world without being tainted by karma? Any Jianghu person with a bit of fame might not have killed hundreds or thousands of people, right? Many grievances were not just because of the battle between good and evil. Taking himself as an example, even though he had kept his original intention of serving his country and his family all along the way, the number of soldiers from other countries who had died in his hands was not a small number. It was shocking to even count them all. That was why Yun Yang murmured from time to time, "Celestial luck, celestial luck." It was not a desire for the celestial luck, but a confusion about it. But now that he heard what Shi Wuchen and the others said and saw these sects risking their lives for the celestial luck banner, Yun Yang vaguely felt that he seemed to understand something. It was not that he was indecisive, but, all the martial artists in the entire bound of universe were like this. The whole atmosphere was like this, not to mention anything else. Thousands of soldiers and horses crossed a single log bridge. Every 3 years, only a handful of people could get the opportunity to go to the next stage. The others were either killed on the bridge or pushed off the bridge. Those who surrendered and gave up, while keeping their lives, also meant the end of their martial path in this world, and it would be difficult for them to advance further. Everyone could only be so cruel, and only by being so cruel could there be room for improvement. Everyone had long accepted this reality. This was the fate of a martial artist. Since you had chosen to be stronger than ordinary people, then these struggles were the price you had to pay. That was all there was to it. That was all. Yun Yang let out a long sigh and murmured with a smile, "I see. I understand now." At this moment, he really felt a lot more relaxed. He was at ease all of a sudden. Remember the mobile version of the website, Chapter 197, Celestial Luck is Fair. Page 1/1, bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 1075. Yun Yang felt as if there had always been a thin layer of fog in front of him, but after listening to everyone's observation of the world, all the fog disappeared, and his vision became unprecedentedly clear. The world in front of him and his path became clearer. That's right. Every world has its own rules. The bound of universe protects the common people with extreme harshness, but correspondingly, it also upholds the concept of the strong being respected. It's to the extreme. In this way, the weak can always live in peace, and the strong will only get stronger and stronger. So, this is the bound of universe. Yun Yang felt extremely relaxed when he realized it. I don't need to look at the bound of universe from the perspective of the secular world of Tianxian. However, at this moment, there was a sudden turbulence in front of him, and the world in front of him became unusually clear. It was as if it was deliberately cooperating with Yun Yang's enlightenment. What he saw in front of him were 9 steps. At the end of the steps was a huge platform. Yun Yang walked up step by step. When his head emerged from the ground, he heard a loud voice saying, "Challenger of celestial luck, residents of 9 supremes enters the arena." The voice was deafening like thunder and could be heard from far and near. Yun Yang suddenly felt that at this moment, there were countless divine senses shrouding the entrance where he was. Every strand of divine sense was mixed with a strong sense of curiosity, and there were even a few strands of divine sense that were full of malice. However, it was obvious that they could feel it. These divine wills only had the ability to probe, but not to pry into what was going on. They were countless gazes. Yun Yang walked up the steps with a calm expression, and his ethereal purple figure quietly appeared on the ground. The moment he appeared, he felt a slight prickling sensation on his face. It was the countless gazes that were fixed on his face at the same time. Yun Yang smiled faintly, his expression unchanged. Standing at the entrance, he raised his eyes leisurely and glanced around. After a while, Shi Wuchen and the others followed him in and lined up beside him, while Yun Xiaofan and the others stood behind their respective masters. In front of the people of the residence of 9 Supremes was a huge platform like the first floor. And the difference was probably right in front of this platform, there was another tall platform made entirely of purple crystal. It looked incomparably luxurious and magnificent. There were 3 seats on the platform, and 3 people in green with golden crowns on their heads were sitting on them. Instinctively, Yun Yang focused his gaze and caught a glimpse of the golden heart-shaped emblem on the sleeves and collars of the 3 men in green. The one in the middle was the leader while the other 2 were his assistants. After looking at this purple crystal platform, the 5 platforms on the left and the 4 platforms on the right also came into view. They were probably the 9 sects with lower-class celestial luck banners, and they were seated in order. The arrangement made the scene look like a gulp, for the entrance that Yun Yang had come from was the only one without a high platform. However, the moment Yun Yang and the people from the residence of 9 Supremes stood there, the circle seemed to be completed in an instant. Wherever Yun Yang's gaze passed by, the current situation was crystal clear to him. The 10 platforms in front of him were none other than the 9 sects with lower-class celestial luck banners and the hosting platform of the Sacred Heart Palace. However, the current difference in treatment was also obvious. Only the challengers did not have a platform to watch the battles, so the difference in their ranks was clear at a glance. But now that the rules were as such, the people from the residence of 9 Supremes could only stand there and wait for the next step. There was nothing they could do about the opponents who were seated. But at this moment, all the people on the platform had the same feeling. This leader of the residence of 9 Supremes was so calm. Seeing that all the people from the residence of 9 Supremes had arrived, the leader of the green-clad men sitting on the platform laughed heartily and stood up. His voice rumbled, "The challenger sects have arrived. The challenge of the lower-class celestial luck banners officially begins." The founder of the residence of 9 Supremes, Supreme Cloud, Yun Yang, the 8 Supremes under him, Shi Wuchen, Luo Dujiang, Tai Qingcang, the man read out the names of the 9 Supremes of the residence of 9 Supremes one by one. "I'm Hu Yunfeng, the deacon of the Sacred Heart Palace's Iron Mask Hall. Beside me are 2 of my brothers, Ding Byuk and Yu Byuk. The 3 of us are from the Sacred Heart Palace's Iron Mask Hall, and the 3 of us are the hosts of this Celestial Luck Banners competition. The 3 of us are willing to accept the wrath of heaven for any unfairness in this battle." The man swore an oath at the very beginning, acting as if he was doing business without any selfishness. However, as soon as he made the oath, a thunderclap rang out in the thick fog. The heavenly Tao had acknowledged the oath, and the oath was established. Everyone's face turned solemn and cold. With this oath, no matter what kind of friendship or inside story they had, it was all invalid here. If they wanted to pass, they could only fight with their strength. Hong Changtian, the sect leader of Kangwu Union, who ranked last among the sects with lower-class celestial luck banners, had been staring at Yun Yang and the others with a complicated look in his eyes. Why does the name Residence of 9 Supremes sound so familiar? It seemed that it was not far from his sect and had just been established. He had received the news when it was first established, but there were so many sects in the bound of universe that there were almost as many as the hairs on a cow. Basically, there were new sects established by martial artists every day. How could a newly established sect be taken seriously by him? Who would have thought that the one who had finally overcome all the obstacles and come here to fight against his sect was this newly established residence of 9 Supremes? Strange things happened every year, but today was especially big, so big that it was almost beyond his understanding. As the saying goes, one can't tolerate others snoring next to one's bed. It really makes sense. If I had known this would happen, would have. Hong Changtian could not help but feel a little regretful. If he had sent a few disciples to uproot the newly established residence of 9 Supremes at that time, how could there be such a scene now? Now, there was only one word to describe it: nurture a tiger and invite disaster. Now, I'll read out the rules of this battle. Hui Yunfeng's voice was loud and clear, and it spread throughout the square. It was clear that he had great control over his mystical qi. However, although his voice was like a tide, the clouds and mist in the surroundings were unmoved by it and remained calm and undisturbed. Yunyang and the others listened carefully, not daring to ignore any details. The finals are indeed not what I know before, or rather, what I know before is only a part of the challenge. The finals were divided into 5 matches. The first 4 matches were a match between the top experts of each sect, a match between the core forces of each sect, a match between disciples, and a match of formations. These matches were similar to what Yunyang had learned earlier, the only difference being the last match. The defending side had the right to propose any form of battle to decide the winner. Then, there was the basic standard of the match, which was a simple 3 out of 5 match. As long as the first side won 3 matches, it would be the winner of the match. However, above the basic rules of victory and defeat, there was another extraordinary rule. If either side won all 5 matches, not only would they obtain the Celestial Luck Banner, but they could also choose to challenge the higher-ranked sects with the Celestial Luck Banner. For example, if residents of 9 Supremes won 5 matches in a row against Kangwu Union and won all 5 matches, it could choose to stop or continue to challenge the 8th-ranked sect with the lower-class Celestial Luck Banner. If it won all 5 matches again, it could continue to challenge the 7th-ranked sect, and so on. However, this rule was just a decoration for Kangwu Union. Even if Kangwu Union was lucky enough to win against residents of 9 Supremes, it would be impossible for them to continue to challenge. If Kangwu Union had such strength, it would not have waited until now, and it would not have been coveted by many sects in the qualification battle. As for residents of 9 Supremes, at least, the people from the 9 sects with Celestial Luck Banners shook their heads and sighed at the same time when they saw the members of residents of 9 Supremes. A sect that had been established for less than a year and had an extremely shallow foundation should be its limit to obtain the qualification to challenge. If it wanted to challenge all the way up after defeating Kangwu Union, it was nothing short of a fool's dream. Even in the battle of this level, all the dead could be resurrected after the battle. The injured could be restored instantly. Their combat strength could always be maintained at the peak. The treatment in this level was obviously much better than the qualification battle, almost the complete opposite of the first level's rule. There was only victory and defeat, no death. After all, the 10 sects, including residents of 9 Supremes, were actually sects that already had Celestial Luck Banners, and they were no longer cannon fodder in the qualification battle. At this moment, except for Kangwu Union, the people from the other 8 sects were all bored to death. How boring! It was too boring. They had come all the way here just to watch Kangwu Union fight, and when the battle was over, they could go home. It had been 3 years, and it was over again. Sects with lower-class Celestial Luck Banners were basically not as good as those with Celestial Luck Banners, for they had the power to look down on all the sects that did not have Celestial Luck Banners. However, it was also because they had personally experienced the effect of Celestial Luck Banners and knew the terrifying effect of higher-class Celestial Luck Banners, that most of the sects had long given up the so-called desire to improve. Even if they still had the will to fight, they knew their limits and would never humiliate themselves if they were not completely confident. Probably, only Golden Cauldron sect, who ranked first, had some other intentions. Having been the chief disciple of lower-class Celestial Luck Banners for a long time, they felt that their accumulation was enough to support them to go further. They wanted to challenge middle-class Celestial Luck Banners after they were done here. They were also the only sects with lower-class Celestial Luck Banners who were qualified to challenge higher-class Celestial Luck Banners. Even Hui Yunfeng and his two companions, who were sitting high above, had only calmness and a faint helplessness on their faces. This year's luck was obviously at rock bottom. Not only were they assigned to preside over the lower-class celestial luck banners, but none of the 8 sects ranked at the bottom had the intention to challenge them. Except for Golden Cauldron sect, who ranked first and wanted to challenge the higher-class celestial luck banners, none of the other sects had any more thoughts about their current position. Oh, there was also Golden Cauldron sect. However, Golden Cauldron sect was still not going to challenge the middle-class celestial luck banners in this venue. Therefore, this was only a battle between Kangwu Union and residents of 9 Supremes. There was no suspense at all. A sect that had dominated lower-class celestial luck banners for 1,000 years was going to challenge residents of 9 Supremes, which had just been established. Even a fool would not bet on the wrong thing. Even though Mount Pentatire had isolated all experts' divine senses and it was difficult to not see the level of each other's strength even when they were face to face, there was no need to look at such an obvious thing with one's eyes. One could easily know the result with one's buttocks. The battle of the celestial luck banners this time is boring. Brothers, do you want to bet? Hui Yunfeng asked his 2 colleagues through voice transmission. Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning asked, Big brother, how do you want to bet? Are you the banker? I'll be the banker, Hui Yunfeng said. Let's bet on the outcome of the battle between residents of 9 Supremes and Kangwu Union. Okay, I bet on Kangwu Union. Ding Byuk said with a chuckle. As long as Big Brother is willing to be the banker, I'll bet on Kangwu Union. Yu Bunning said with a chuckle. Hui Yunfeng glared at him and said, Don't you think this is boring? Do you think I'm a fool? Ding Byuk laughed and said, It's you who's boring, Big Brother. As an elder brother, you should be generous. Since you've said you'll be the banker, it means we can bet at will. Don't tell me you want us to bet on residents of 9 Supremes to start the match? Yes, Yu Bunning chimed in. One can't be too shameless. If there's a limit to the banker, it's a cheating bet, isn't it? Hui Yunfeng stroked his chin and said, Brothers, you'd better weigh the pros and cons. Although residents of 9 Supremes is only a new sect, its bearing and power are extraordinary. After all, it's also one of the best sects that has stood out in the qualification battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. I've heard that Wild Saber sect, which has fought with Kangwu Union many times decades ago, is also in this qualification battle. Since residents of 9 Supremes can defeat Wild Saber sect, I'm afraid its strength cannot be underestimated. At least, in my opinion, both sides are evenly matched, and there's still a lot of suspense. Brothers, please think it over. I'm a good banker. Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning snorted at the same time and looked at Hui Yunfeng as if they were looking at an idiot. Change bets? Do you think we're idiots? Do you think we'll give you spiritual jades for nothing? We're brothers, Hui Yunfeng said. A small bet is good enough. How about 10, no, 5 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades? If you 2 bet on residents of 9 Supremes, I'll pay you 5 to 1. Huh. Ding Byuk laughed. Huh. Yu Bunning laughed. Hui Yunfeng asked, not satisfied? It doesn't matter. If you bet on residents of 9 Supremes, I'll pay you 10 to 1. What do you think? If you win, you'll get 50 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades. What's the point of Kangwu Union? You'll only get a little profit if you win. Fortune comes with risk. Isn't that right? Huh, 15 to 1. Huh, 30 to 1. This is my limit. If you still don't want to bet, forget it. Hui Yunfeng complained. This is too boring. Yu Bunning pondered for a moment and said, 30 to 1, right? Then I'll bet 2 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades on residents of 9 Supremes. You're the boss, and as your brother, giving you 2 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades is already my limit. I really can't afford any more. Ding Byuk was furious. You Bunning. Why did you say yes? What did I do to you? This shameless guy has been cheating us of supreme-grade spiritual jades all these years. He has cheated us of hundreds of pieces. Why did you still fall for it? Yu Bunning smiled. You still don't understand. This guy is definitely trying to pull us into the game. What's the big deal about 2 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades? Just consider it a small bet to entertain the gambler. Hui Yunfeng was amused. Ding Byuk, why don't you just tell me whether you want to bet or not? It's your business whether you want to bet or not, but don't make trouble and interfere with other people's judgment. Ding Byuk said, since Yu Bunning has already bet, wouldn't it make me look like I'm not loyal enough to let him suffer? Let's risk our lives and bet with him. I'll lose 2 pieces of spiritual jades to you. But, there's one thing we have to agree on. When we go back, take out your 1,000 spirits wine and treat us to a drink. Otherwise, you, the banker, can't win. It's a deal, Hui Yunfeng said. The 2 men sighed and said, it's a deal. When Hui Yunfeng saw that the bet was a sure win, he suddenly cheered up and said, I'm really interested in this match now. Let's watch it carefully later. The 2 men rolled their eyes. You're interested in the supreme-grade spiritual jades, aren't you? I really admire your shamelessness. You can make something that doesn't even have a shadow look real. Wild Saber sect hasn't participated in the Battle of the Banner for at least 100 years, but you actually used it as a ruse just now. I really don't know what to say about you. Hui Yunfeng was taken aback and said in surprise, oh? Wild Saber sect hasn't participated in the Battle of the Banner for 100 years? That's my mistake. Anyway, our bet is the winner between residents of 9 Supremes and Kangwu Union. It doesn't matter whether Wild Saber sect is here or not. Ding Byuk rolled his eyes and said, I knew you were full of nonsense just now. I almost believed you. Down below, Hong Changtian, the sect leader of Kangwu Union, had been standing for a while, obviously waiting for the first and second matches to start. But the 3 deacons of Sacred Heart Palace above him were talking about something and had ignored him for a long time. It was not appropriate for him to sit down, but if he continued to stand, it would only be more embarrassing. What? What's going on? Yun Yang was also confused by the current situation. What's going on? Judging from the secret discussion of the 3 people above, there seems to be a special atmosphere. What are they talking about? Why are they so happy? Are they going to get down to business or not? While they were wondering, Hui Yunfeng turned his head and said leisurely, residents of 9 Supremes, Yun Yang, sect leader Hong Changtian of Kangwu Union, please come up here. Both men moved at the same time and went up in confusion. Almost at the same time, they arrived at the purple crystal platform. Let's discuss the order of the duels. Hui Yunfeng felt that 4 supreme-grade spiritual jades were about to fall into his pocket, so he was in a good mood. Thinking that no matter how small a grasshopper was, it was still meat, and the 4 supreme-grade spiritual jades were not grasshoppers at all, he said in a pleasant tone, both of you, discuss how to carry out the first match of the backbone. How to carry out the second match of the pinnacle. According to the usual practice, Kangwu Union will decide how to fight in the 3rd match. After that, there may be a 4th and 5th match, but it's all decided here. No matter how amiable Hui Yunfeng was and how he behaved in an inquiring tone, both Hong Changtian and Yun Yang could feel from his words that he had already made arrangements, and they just had to carry them out. That's good, said Hong Changtian. Yun Yang followed his advice and said, I have no opinion either. It's up to the High Emissary. That's for the best. Hui Yunfeng said, then let's start as soon as possible. Sect leaders, you can go back and arrange your men in formations now. The Battle of the Celestial Luck Banners should be fair, so I won't say anything more. After a pause, an even more cordial smile spread across his face. I wish both of you will get what you want in advance. Ah! The corners of Yun Yang and Hong Changtian's mouths twitched at the same time. You wish both of us to get what we want at the same time? What you're doing is really weird. This chapter had 5,000 words. Chapter 1076. There was no sincerity in this blessing at all. Yun Yang twitched his lips, while Hong Changtian rolled his eyes. As the two men turned and walked down, they heard Hong Changtian say in a cold voice, "Sect leader Yun, although blades and spears have no eyes, with the help of this magical realm, casualties can be avoided. When this challenge is over, we should have a good time as neighbors." What he meant was that he could not kill Yun Yang here, but it would not be too late to kill him when they got back. Yun Yang smiled warmly and said, "Residents of 9 Supremes is just a new sect. It is indeed time for us to ask sect leader Hong for some valuable experience in dealing with people as a sect with a lower-class celestial luck banner. After all, we are all beginners in mastering the celestial luck banner, and it is inevitable that we will be flustered and make a fool of ourselves." When he heard Yun Yang say that residents of 9 Supremes would definitely win the battle against Kangwu Union, Hong Changtian snorted angrily and left with a flick of his sleeve. Yun Yang laughed and turned to return to the main formation. The first match is the Battle of the Backbone. How about Shi Wuchen? Yun Yang asked, looking at the 8 men. Luo Dujiang coughed and said, "Itua can, of course, but I wonder if we brothers will have the chance to fight after him." Shi Wuchen snorted and unleashed his sword intent. With a clang, he bounced Luo Dujiang a few steps back. Then, with a swoosh, he drew his sword and rushed out without saying anything. "Residents of 9 Supreme Sword Master, Shi Wuchen, is here. Which senior from Kangwu Union is here to teach me?" As soon as Shi Wuchen appeared, the burst of sword energy made everyone shudder. Who is this man? His sword intent is so strong. However, when someone introduced himself, the crowd burst into laughter and did not stop for a long time. I was wondering who it was. It turns out to be Shi Wuchen of the Demiurge Flawed 10, the famous Bound of Universe Whetstone. No wonder. Shi Wuchen, who heard the uproar from the crowd, was not offended by the mockery and ridicule. He smiled faintly and said, that's right. I'm Shi Wuchen, who was known as the Whetstone in the past. In fact, today is no different from the past, I'm still everyone's Whetstone. Today, I hope that the experts from Kangwu Union would be generous enough to give me some pointers, so that I, this Whetstone, can sharpen Kangwu Union well. If you miss this opportunity, it'll be hard for you to enjoy the benefit of resurrection. Shi Wuchen smiled coldly. Everyone, please seize this opportunity. When faced with the provocation and ridicule that came surging over, Shi Wuchen was actually composed, and he seemed as if he was willing to endure it. Hong Changtian, the sect master of Kangwu Union, narrowed his eyes for the first time when he saw this. Third junior brother. However, a person walked out from behind him. He seemed to be a middle-aged man in his 40s. His expression was cold and indifferent as he replied in a deep voice, I will not disappoint senior brother. I will definitely win this battle. Then, he walked out slowly and said, Jiang Jingfei, the merciless sword of Kangwu Union, is here to learn from the residents of 9 Supremes. Jiang Jingfei paused for a moment and said, I've long heard of Brother Shi's name, but I've never had the chance to meet you. Today's battle comes at a good time, and I can fulfill my long-cherished wish of sharpening my saber. A cold smile appeared on Shi Wuchen's initially cold face. Please. With a loud sword hum, Jiang Jingfei's sword was unsheathed. The field was immediately filled with a brilliant light, and a sword energy soared into the sky. The massive sword energy filled the field, and the swords that hung by the waists of many people actually let out a clang. There was actually a resonance of tens of thousands of swords, which was an extraordinary sight. Jiang Luoluo, who was standing beside Yun Yang, said, "This man is Jiang Jingfei, the merciless sword, the second expert of Kangwu Union. However, his cultivation base is rumored to be even higher than the sect master, Hong Chang Tian. He has been obsessed with the sword all his life. Although he hasn't been cultivating for a long time, his sword cultivation base has already reached a higher level, and he has even forged the heart of the sword, making him a formidable opponent." Yun Yang asked, "What level is this man at?" "I'm not sure about that," Jiang Luoluo said. "Although Kangwu Union is a sect that owns the Celestial Luck Banner, it is only a lower-class sect, and its ranking is the lowest. Our Phoenix sect doesn't pay much attention to it. In fact, the reason why I know some of Jiang Jingfei's background is because, when I arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes, I specially selected some information in my spare time." As she spoke, the contempt that was ingrained in the bones of a middle-class sect disciple towards a lower-class sect was completely revealed. It was all contempt and contempt. Yun Yang asked in a low voice, "Luoluo, may I ask, what is the level of the strongest expert in your Phoenix sect?" Jiang Luoluo hesitated for a moment and then said, "I'm really not sure about that. All I know is that the sect master's cultivation base has reached the pinnacle of the first grade of Supreme Saint, but I can't guarantee that the sect master's cultivation base is the highest in the sect, nor can I guarantee that there is no one who is on par with or even stronger than him." Yun Yang nodded and thanked her. "This information is enough. Thank you." Jiang Luoluo couldn't say it clearly because it was a secret of the sect. However, what Jiang Luoluo had said so far was as clear as it could be. In sects that had a long heritage, the cultivation base of the sect master was usually not the highest in the sect. After all, the sect master needed to handle more external affairs than others, and it was difficult for him to focus on his cultivation path when he was always in charge of the sect's survival. However, the cultivation base of the top expert in the sect must not be too far away from the sect master. There would never be a situation where the difference between a sect supreme saint and the top expert in the sect was like heaven and earth. As far as I know, there are 3 supreme saint experts in the General Commerce League, and all of them are third-grade supreme saint experts. That's why they have the confidence to compete for the higher-class Celestial Luck Banner. Jiang Luoluo's sect doesn't rank too high among the sects with the middle-class Celestial Luck Banner, and their sect master is first-grade Supreme Saint. It can basically be inferred that most of the middle-class Celestial Luck Banner sects don't have experts at the level of Saint. Even the super sects ranked at the bottom of the upper-class ranking may not have experts at the level of Saint. Yun Yang pondered and came to a conclusion that the residence of 9 Supremes was relatively happy to see. At this time, Shi Wuchen also began to slowly draw his sword in the field. The shiny blade was revealed inch by inch. Compared to Jiang Jingfei's resonance of 10,000 swords, Shi Wuchen's unsheathing of his sword was a little ordinary, with almost nothing outstanding. But no matter what the prestige was before the fight, the true meaning of the contest was always on the actual fight. The 2 men's swords clashed head-on at the beginning of the fight. The moment the sword light crossed, a deafening rumble rang out, like the roar of a dragon or a tiger, stirring the hearts of the people. As soon as the 2 of them clashed, even such an extreme fight without any tricks was relatively rare in the current battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. The battle between Shi Wuchen and Jiang Jingfei was the backbone battle in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. It was also the first battle. In addition to winning or losing, the first battle also involved the issue of momentum. If the challenger won the first battle, his morale would naturally be boosted, and his prestige would be greatly boosted. On the other hand, if the defender won, the situation would inevitably take a turn for the worse. Therefore, both the attacker and the defender would put in a lot of effort in the first battle. Otherwise, Kangwu Union would not have sent Jiang Jingfei, a high-end combat force whose real strength could at least be ranked among the top 3 in the Kangwu Union, in the first battle. In this head-on clash between the two of them, the most important thing was one's own cultivation. This was because in this kind of battle, the support that moves and movement techniques could provide was at its lowest. Moreover, once one lost, it would be like a landslide, with almost no room for recovery. Therefore, in this kind of battle mode, unless it was at the very last moment, it was rarely used, not to mention an extreme clash right from the start. Therefore, as soon as the fight began, everyone on both sides was on tenterhooks, hoping or worried that the winner would be decided in one move. Fortunately, the battle was far from over. Shi Wuchen staggered and retreated 30 feet back as if he had been electrocuted. Jiang Jingfei, who was opposite him, swayed as well, but he only took half a step back. Both of them turned their bodies sideways at the same time. Swoosh! 2 gusts of sword wind flew past their throats at the same time. On the surface, it seemed that they were evenly matched, and Shi Wuchen was slightly weaker, but it was not to the extent that he could not fight. The gap was very small. The faces of Yun Yang and the others turned serious. The expressions of the people from the other sects who were watching the battle also turned serious. Even Hui Yunfeng's expression changed abruptly. Ding Byuk and Yu Buning's eyes lit up. The battle of celestial fortune isolated all divine senses, so it was impossible to use one's profound cultivation base and divine sense to see through the opponent's cultivation base as usual. Others might not be able to see through it, but Hui Yunfeng and the other two, as the higher-ups of the Sacred Heart Palace, were far superior to everyone else in terms of vision and experience, so they could see more clues than anyone else. Even though the 3 of them could not see through the real cultivation base of the 2 combatants because of the restriction of this realm, they could tell that Shi Wuchen had deliberately retreated 30 feet after the impact, while Jiang Jingfei's half-step back was the real reason he lost his footing and had to retreat. In other words, Shi Wuchen was not as weak as he appeared to be. Jiang Jingfei, who was fighting on the other side, obviously did not notice this. Moreover, no matter how strong the 2 sides were, it was inevitable for them to bear the impact. Shi Wuchen retreated 30 feet, which was enough to dissipate all the aftershocks of the impact, while Jiang Jingfei forcibly suppressed it. In the end, he could not hold on any longer and had to retreat, which increased the pressure he had to bear. But in terms of this blow, not only did Shi Wuchen not fall into a disadvantageous position, he even had the upper hand. The 2 men exchanged blows in the arena, and the battle was extremely fierce. Shi Wuchen maintained the momentum he had at the beginning and was now at a complete disadvantage. Every time their weapons collided, his body would sway. Seeing that he had the upper hand, his opponent did not show any mercy. He waved his sword and attacked fiercely like a storm, almost using it as a broadsword, forcing Shi Wuchen to fight head-on. Obviously, he wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. His opponent's intention was obvious: he wanted to kill and suppress Shi Wuchen with the momentum of a mountain. He wanted to declare the invincibility of Kangwu Union in that overbearing manner. Shi Wuchen kept retreating. After several clashes, he had retreated no less than 50 feet, almost from the center of the arena to the opposite side. Seeing that their side had gained the upper hand, the 30-odd men from Kangwu Union cheered and cheered loudly, and the atmosphere became more and more intense. On the side of residents of 9 Supremes, Yun Xiaofan and the other junior disciples were also cheering loudly, their palms sweating and their faces extremely nervous. They wished they could join the battle themselves and help. Another loud clang rang out. Shi Wuchen was still weaker than his opponent as before. He staggered and took 3 steps back, his body still swaying and his face pale. Jiang Jingfei, on the opposite side, was also pale and sweating, but he was in high spirits, and his eyes were blazing with excitement. He pressed forward step by step and did not relax at all. Obviously, he felt that victory was in his grasp, and he was chasing after his opponent, intending to finish the battle in one fell swoop. At this point, the battle between the two men had lasted more than 10 minutes. In the arena, Shi Wuchen's situation was getting more and more unfavorable. His breathing was unusually rapid, and his dodging gradually became irregular. Suddenly, he grunted and staggered, his body and mind unbalanced, as if he had lost his center of gravity. Even his sword was flung away, leaving him vulnerable. Seeing that the opportunity had come, Jiang Jingfei grinned hideously and immediately used his fastest movement technique to dash across 100 feet like a bolt of lightning. His sword flashed with a frightening sword light, and with a long roar, he thrust it forward like a shooting star. The target was Shi Wuchen's chest, a vital part of his body. His intention to kill was obvious. Seeing that it was impossible to avoid the sword, the outcome was about to be decided. The people of Residence of Nine Supremes exclaimed at once. Although they knew that both sides would be resurrected in the main arena of the Celestial Luck Banner contest, they were still newcomers to the place, and they could not help but be frightened when faced with such a life-or-death situation. However, at this moment, Shi Wuchen, who had lost his balance and was about to fall, suddenly reversed his falling momentum. With a roll that was completely impossible and unimaginable to others, he moved 3 feet away from Shi Wuchen at the last moment. Jiang Jingfei's sword brushed past Shi Wuchen's side and rushed over. This was a sword that was determined to win, and Jiang Jingfei did not hold back at all. He had already used the same move. At this moment, Jiang Jingfei's face changed dramatically. But it was too late for him to react. After avoiding his opponent's fatal strike, Shi Wuchen counterattacked fiercely. His body turned sideways, and his sword flashed out like a poisonous dragon coming out of the abyss. The sword was unprecedentedly fast, almost surpassing the speed of light. In the blink of an eye, it had already reached its target. A soft "piu" sound signified that the sword had struck its target. Jiang Jingfei screamed, and his eyes turned to his chest in disbelief. A sword was stuck there, glinting with a cold light. Streams of blood were flowing out of his chest. The sword came so fast that the tip of the sword pierced through his chest and into the ground. Jiang Jingfei roared and tried to leap up with all his remaining strength. At that moment, he had forgotten that his body was pinned to the ground by a long sword. With this leap, his body had already been torn apart before he could hurt his enemy. However, at that moment, he was determined. Ignoring his torn body, he persisted in brandishing his hands and viciously strangled Shi Wuchen's neck with both hands. The metal wind whistled. "You cheated." Shi Wuchen kicked out, and Jiang Jingfei's body, which was already in tatters, was instantly smashed into pieces. In a battle, the winner takes precedence. Everything else is trivial. So what if I cheated? Don't you know that all is fair in war? I can't lose this battle, and I won't lose, Shi Wuchen said indifferently. Shi Wuchen's voice was not very loud, but everyone present had sharp ears and eyes. Everyone heard him clearly, and they all took it as a lesson and understood it in their hearts. Jiang Jingfei's body was torn apart in the air, scattering in 7 or 8 directions. Blood splattered all over the ground. Chapter 1077. The winner had been decided. The one who had been attacking fiercely was defeated and dead. And the one who had been dodging and being at a disadvantage had miraculously turned the tables. The happy face of Hong Changtian, the leader of Kangwu Union, turned pale in an instant. All the people of Kangwu Union had dull eyes, as if they had been struck by lightning. They had lost. They had lost the crucial first match. And they had lost in an inexplicable way when the situation was in their favor. All is fair in war. What kind of F***king saying is fair in war? Hong Changtian almost coughed up a mouthful of blood. At this moment, there was a flash of light in the field. The legendary benefit of resurrection had come as expected. Jiang Jingfei, who had been crushed to pieces and could not be more dead, was restored in an instant, but standing on the ground, his face was still full of bewilderment. After a long while, he suddenly roared, "Shi Wuchen! Come out!" Hui Yunfeng shouted from above, "The winner has been decided. Why are you still yelling over there? Stand down!" Hearing this rebuke, Jiang Jingfei trembled all over, and his face was as pale as a dead man's, completely drained of blood. Only when Hong Changtian shouted at him repeatedly did he walk back step by step. Every step he took was as heavy as dragging countless mountains. Hui Yunfeng sighed softly and said, "He is an idiot." He did not feel that his opponent was deliberately showing weakness and deliberately consuming his energy and physical strength. It is not a shame that he lost this match. It would be a miracle if he didn't lose. Meanwhile, Shi Wuchen had returned to residence of 9 Supremes camp with a pale face. What greeted him was the seemingly concerned but secretly mocking gazes of his brothers. Luo Dajiang came up to him and said as soon as he saw him, "Second brother, you must have had a hard time putting on this show, didn't you?" Shi Wuchen snorted and rolled his eyes. "What else could I have done? That's what Big Brother had arranged. I wanted to cut him down with my sword, but Big Brother didn't want to, did he?" Ren Wuxing laughed when he heard that. "Second brother, you can feel it yourself. What level is Jiang Jingfei's strength?" Shi Wuchen scoffed. "Judging by his strength, he's probably at the pinnacle of a second-tier saint. If it wasn't for Boss repeatedly reminding me of the need for tactics, I would have turned him into dust with one slash." Everyone laughed. No one mocked Shi Wuchen for blowing his own trumpet. Instead, all of them patted Shi Wuchen's shoulder and praised him. "Second brother. What a good second brother." Shi Wuchen snorted and raised his head. But then, he turned his head suspiciously, "You guys, why don't you call me Yi Tuo anymore?" Everyone said sincerely, "Second brother, you won the first battle and made such a great contribution. You even put in so much effort to put on an act. You've already put in so much effort. How can we have the nerve to call you names again? We can't bear to." Shi Wuchen still felt that something was not right. He scratched his head and said, "Something is still not right." "You guys," Yun Yang intervened at the right time and said in a seemingly serious tone, "It's the second round now. Don't bother about titles anymore." The second match was the pinnacle battle between the two sides. It was the usual battle between the top experts of each sect. At this moment, Jiang Jingfei was kneeling in front of the high platform belonging to Kangwu Union, refusing to stand up. His face was full of tears, and he was silent for a long time. Hong Changtian said a few words as if to comfort him, but Jiang Jingfei's knees seemed to have grown from the ground. The people from Kangwu Union could do nothing to him. Shi Wuchen sighed softly. "That man is a real man. Even I can't bear to see him like this." At this moment, an old man on the opposite side rose with a sword in his hand. His body was full of mystical qi as he landed on the platform. "Get up, Jingfei. Open your eyes wide and watch as I turn the tables for you." The old man's hair was white, and he looked hale and hearty. He was thin, but he was extraordinarily tall, more than 8 feet tall. When he stood up, he looked like a bamboo pole, standing straight and upright. The newcomer's green robe fluttered in the wind, and in the blink of an eye, he was already in the arena. "Kangwu Union has lost the first round," he said coldly. "I wonder which expert will residents of 9 Supremes send to fight the second round? I'm Gao Danyun of Kangwu Union, and I await your challenge." Yun Yang stood up and was about to fight when Luo Dajiang spoke first. "Boss, shall I fight this round?" Yun Yang stopped and nodded. "Yes, if Dajiang fights this round, it will be more in line with the established strategy." Luo Dajiang laughed, obviously quite pleased with himself. Ren Qingquang frowned and said, "Boss, this is a pinnacle battle, and it is customary for the strongest experts of each sect to fight. This Gao Danyun must be the #1 expert of Kangwu Union. Divine senses are shielded here, so it's difficult for us to tell the level of each other's strength. This battle may be unstable. It'll be fine if Dajiang wins, but if he loses, the road ahead will be difficult. Even if he wins this battle in the end, he will lose the chance to challenge again. Luo Dajiang hesitated at once when he heard that. After all, it was a matter of great importance. The battle of the #1 expert was indeed unusual, and the purpose of Residence of 9 Supremes was to seize the higher-level celestial luck banners, so there could be no mistakes in any of the battles. They must win all the battles. Lan Ruojuan and the others also looked solemn at this moment, no longer as playful as before. It was gratifying that Shi Wuchen had made a good start, but it was not necessarily because his opponents did not know his true strength. The old man he was fighting now was obviously their #1 expert. If his strength was too profound and exceeded their expectations, and he defeated Luo Dajiang, who was slightly weaker, then they would be fools, and everything would be over. Only Yun Yang's expression was still relaxed as he said, "Dajiang, don't worry. I can guarantee that you won't lose. This old man's strength is mediocre, far weaker than yours." "Really?" the others asked together. "Of course it's true. I've seen it with my own eyes." Yun Yang laughed. Luo Dajiang regained his spirits at once and said cheerfully, "If that's the case, there's nothing else to worry about. I'll go now." "Go ahead." Luo Dajiang leaped down with his saber on his shoulder. "Supreme Saber of Residence of 9 Supremes, Luo Dajiang, is here to learn from you." The stands on both sides were filled with whispers. Why is he one of the Demiurge Flawed 10 again? This Residence of 9 Supremes is a little interesting. On the high platform, Hui Yunfeng could not help but laugh. 2 of the Demiurge Flawed 10 have shown up one after another. If a few more of them come, is this Residence of 9 Supremes a concentration camp for the famous whetstones in the bound of universe? "Big brother, don't underestimate the Demiurge Flawed 10, said Ding Byuk. "These 10 people have been whetstones for many years, but none of them has died prematurely. This is already a very rare miracle. Apart from their own strength, which is not weaker than the top experts of lower-class celestial luck banners, they also have extremely rich combat experience. If all of them really converge and become members of a sect, it will be like joining a rope from a single line, and their comprehensive strength is absolutely not to be underestimated. The battle just now is the best proof. Once Residence of 9 Supremes obtains the celestial luck banner, I'm afraid it will be like a trapped dragon soaring into the sky or leaping into the abyss." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.